The crystal chandeliers of the Graymore estate cast dancing shadows across the marble floor as Everett Puller balanced a silver tray of champagne flutes, his practiced hands steady despite the chaos swirling around him. Dawn had barely broken over the Virginia countryside, yet the mansion already hummed with frantic energy, florists arguing over rose arrangements, wedding planners barking orders into headsets, and somewhere in the distance, a string quartet tuning their instruments for what the media had dubbed the wedding of the century. Everett had worked countless events at prestigious venues across the state, but nothing compared to this. Today, Elvin Ashford, only daughter of real estate magnate Richard Graymore and heiress to a fortune estimated at $3.2 billion, would marry Senator Bradley Carmichael in a ceremony that had drawn guests from across the globe. The security detail alone numbered 40 personnel, each wearing discreet earpieces and scanning every face with practiced suspicion. As Everett moved through the servants' corridor toward the main kitchen, he caught fragments of gossip from the other staff. "Did you see the dress? Vera Wang custom creation. They say it cost more than my house. The senator's family arrived last night in separate cars. Did you notice? Not even speaking to each other. I heard Miss Elvin requested the wedding be postponed twice, but her father wouldn't hear of it." Everett kept his expression neutral, a skill he'd perfected over 15 years in the service industry. In his world, you saw everything and said nothing. You were invisible furniture, present but unacknowledged, trusted with the intimate details of the wealthy precisely because they believed you didn't matter enough to remember them. But Everett remembered everything. He'd been working at the Graymore estate for 3 months now, part of the permanent catering staff hired for the endless parade of galas, fundraisers, and political dinners that Richard Graymore hosted. In that time, Everett had observed things that made his stomach turn. The way the senator gripped Vivienne's arm just a little too tightly when he thought no one was watching, the forced quality of her smile in his presence, the way her shoulders tensed whenever Bradley Carmichael entered a room. Everett had seen that look before. His own sister had worn it, years ago, in the months before her ex-husband's abuse had escalated to the point where Everett had to physically remove her from her own home in the middle of the night. The memory still haunted him, the fear in her eyes, the way she'd flinched at sudden movements, the shame that made her defend the man who was destroying her. He'd sworn then that he would never ignore those signs again, never remain silent when he recognized the subtle evidence of control masquerading as love. But what could a waiter do against a senator, against the Graymore family empire, against a wedding that had been planned for 18 months with 500 guests and a media circus already camped outside the estate gates? Everett pushed through the kitchen doors, setting down his tray with more force than necessary. The head chef, a temperamental Frenchman named Pierre, barely glanced up from the elaborate wedding cake he was decorating, a 6-tiered masterpiece of spun sugar and edible gold leaf. "Table 7 needs more champagne," Pierre barked. "And Everett, Miss Ashford's breakfast tray, take it up yourself. She requested you specifically." Everett's heart skipped a beat. In 3 months, Elvin Graymore had never requested him specifically for anything. She'd always been unfailingly polite when their paths crossed, a rarity among the wealthy, who mostly looked through service staff as if they were ghosts, but she'd never singled him out. "Are you certain?" Everett asked. Pierre thrust an elegant silver tray toward him, laden with fresh fruit, artisanal pastries, and a pot of Earl Grey tea. "Do I look uncertain? 3rd floor, the bridal suite. And don't linger, the wedding planner has the entire timeline mapped to the minute. The bride eats, she dresses, she marries. Simple." Nothing about this felt simple. Everett carried the tray up the servants' staircase, his mind racing. The Graymore estate had been built in 1847, a sprawling monument to old Southern money, with its grand staircases meant for family and guests, and its narrow, utilitarian staircases meant for people like him, people whose presence was necessary but whose visibility was unwanted. The third-floor hallway was quieter than the chaos below, insulated by thick carpets and heavy oak doors. Everett could hear muffled voices from some of the guest rooms, early risers preparing for the ceremony, but the bridal suite at the end of the hall sat silent. He knocked softly. "Room service, Miss Ashford." "Come in." Her voice sounded strained tight. Everett balanced the tray on one hand and opened the door. The bridal suite was a cathedral of white walls, white furniture, white roses in crystal vases on every surface. The wedding dress hung like a ghost against the far wall, a cascade of silk and lace that probably cost more than Everett would earn in 5 years. But it was Elvin herself who captured his attention. She stood by the window overlooking the estate's gardens, still in her silk robe, her dark hair loose around her shoulders. She was 28 years old, classically beautiful in the way of old Hollywood starlets, but this morning she looked fragile, almost translucent in the early light. When she turned to face him, Everett saw what the carefully applied makeup couldn't quite hide: the redness around her eyes that suggested she'd been crying, the slight tremor in her hands as she clasped them together. "Thank you, Everett," she said quietly. "Please set it on the table." He did as instructed, but something made him pause. Maybe it was the professional instinct developed over years of reading rooms and people. Maybe it was the memory of his sister. Maybe it was the desperate quality he heard beneath Vivienne's composed exterior. "Will there be anything else, Miss Ashford?" She opened her mouth, then closed it, opened it again. "Everett, you've worked here for 3 months. In that time, have you ever seen me happy?" The question was so unexpected, so raw, that Everett forgot every rule of professional distance. He looked at her, really looked at her, and saw a woman trapped in a gilded cage of her own family's making. "No, ma'am," he answered honestly, "I haven't." Vivienne's laugh was bitter. At least someone's willing to tell the truth. She moved away from the window, packing the room like a caged animal. "Do you know what it's like, Everett, to have your entire life planned out for you, every decision made by committee, every relationship evaluated for its strategic value?" Everett remained silent, sensing she needed to speak more than she needed him to respond. "Bradley, Senator Carmichael, he's perfect on paper. Pedigree, political connections, the right schools, the right friends. My father orchestrated our introduction at a fundraiser 2 years ago. 6 months later, Bradley proposed. I never even had a choice in the matter. It was just expected." She stopped packing, turning to face Everett with eyes that held a terrifying mixture of desperation and resignation. "I tried to postpone, twice, but my father, he's invested so much in this alliance. Bradley's political career, our family's reputation, the business connections. How do you disappoint everyone you've ever known? How do you walk away from what everyone tells you is your destiny? What would you do if you were expected to marry someone you didn't love? Drop your thoughts below, because Vivienne's about to face an impossible choice." Everett felt his chest tighten. Every professional instinct screamed at him to maintain boundaries, to deliver the breakfast and leave. But the human part of him, the brother who'd failed to act soon enough to spare his sister years of pain, couldn't stay silent. "Miss Ashford," he said carefully, "in my experience, the only destiny we have is the one we choose for ourselves. Everything else is just other people's expectations." Elvin stared at him, and for a moment, Everett saw something shift in her expression. A flicker of hope quickly extinguished. "It's too late," she whispered. "The guests are arriving. The ceremony starts in 4 hours. The entire world is watching." Before Everett could respond, the door burst open. Richard Graymore filled the doorway, his imposing frame dressed in a morning suit, his silver hair perfectly styled. He was 63 years old and looked like he'd been carved from granite, hard, unyielding, impossible to move. "Vivienne," he said, his voice carrying the weight of absolute authority, Why isn't your hair and makeup team here yet? We're already behind schedule." His eyes flicked to Everett with barely concealed irritation. "You're dismissed." Everett bowed his head and moved toward the door, but not before catching one last glimpse of Vivienne's face. The brief moment of vulnerability had vanished, replaced by the composed mask she wore so well. As he stepped into the hallway, Richard Ashford's voice followed him. "And Vivienne, Bradley wants to see you before the ceremony. He's waiting in the library. Don't keep him waiting, you know how he gets." The door closed with a decisive click. Everett stood in the hallway, his hands clenched at his sides. "You know how he gets." The casual way Richard had said it, as if Bradley's temper was just another personality quirk to be managed, made Everett's blood run cold. He should go back downstairs, return to his duties, stay in his lane. But his feet wouldn't move. Something was very wrong here. Every instinct screamed it. And if he walked away now, if he said nothing and did nothing, he would spend the rest of his life wondering what he might have prevented. Everett made a decision that would change everything. Instead of returning to the kitchen, he moved quietly down the hall toward the back staircase that led to the second floor, where the library was located. If Bradley Carmichael wanted to see Elvin before the wedding, Everett wanted to know why. Wanted to see with his own eyes whether his instincts about the senator were correct. The library occupied the entire east wing of the second floor, a two-story room lined with first-edition books that no one ever read and original artwork that existed solely to impress. Everett knew the layout well. He'd served drinks there during countless political gatherings. There was a small service entrance hidden behind a panel in the wall, designed to allow staff to enter and exit without disturbing the room's occupants. He slipped through it now, positioning himself behind the partially open panel where he could see and hear but remain unseen. Senator Bradley Carmichael stood by the fireplace, and Everett felt his suspicions crystallize into certainty. The senator was 35 years old, handsome in the way politicians needed to be, with the kind of smile that photographed well and eyes that never quite matched its warmth. He was on his phone, his voice low and urgent. "I don't care what it takes, Stephen. The prenup is ironclad. Once we're married, her trust fund becomes marital property. Within 6 months, I'll have enough access to liquidate what we need for the campaign." A pause. "No, she doesn't suspect anything. She's too busy playing the dutiful daughter to ask questions." Everett's heart hammered against his ribs. Bradley continued. The old man's desperate to secure his legacy through political connections. He'd marry his daughter to a statue if it came with the right last name. And Vivienne, she's been groomed her entire life to be ornamental. After today, she'll be exactly where I need her, beautiful, wealthy, and silent. The library door opened, and Elvin entered. Bradley's demeanor transformed instantly. The calculating predator became the devoted groom, crossing the room to take her hands with a smile that would have convinced anyone who hadn't heard what Everett just heard. "Darling," Bradley said warmly, "I wanted to see you before the chaos begins, to tell you how beautiful you look." Elvin smiled weakly. "I'm not even dressed yet." "You're always beautiful." Bradley lifted her hand to his lips, a gesture that might have been romantic if Everett hadn't just heard him refer to her as ornamental. "I wanted to give you something, a wedding gift." He pulled a small velvet box from his pocket, opening it to reveal a diamond bracelet that probably cost more than Everett's car. "Bradley, you shouldn't have." "Nothing's too good for my wife." He fastened it around her wrist, his fingers lingering just a moment too long, gripping just a fraction too tightly. "This is just the beginning, Vivienne. We're going to build an empire together. You'll see." Elvin looked at the bracelet, and Everett saw something in her expression that made his decision for him. It wasn't happiness or gratitude. It was the look of a prisoner accepting her chains. "I should get back upstairs," Elvin said quietly. "The hair and makeup team will be waiting." "Of course." Bradley kissed her forehead, a gesture that would have seemed tender if not for the possessive way his hand gripped her shoulder. "4 more hours and you'll be Mrs. Carmichael. I can hardly wait." After Elvin left, Bradley immediately returned to his phone call, his mask slipping again. "She's gone. No problems. The girl's completely under control. Her father's made sure of that." Everett carefully backed away from his hiding spot, his mind reeling. He'd seen enough, heard enough. Elvin Graymore was walking into a trap, and everyone around her, her father, the wedding planner, the 500 guests gathering below, were either complicit or blind to it. What could he do? He was just a waiter. No one would believe him. If he went to Richard Graymore with what he'd heard, he'd be fired and escorted off the property before he could finish his sentence. If he went to the police, they'd laugh. He had no proof, just the word of service staff against a senator. But he had to do something. Everett returned to the kitchen in a daze, mechanically going through the motions of his duties while his mind raced. The morning accelerated around him. Guests began arriving, luxury cars clogging the circular drive, photographers jockeying for position, the string quartet launching into their prelude selections. At 11 o'clock, Everett was assigned to the 3rd floor again, part of the team ensuring the bridal party had everything they needed. The hallway outside Vivienne's suite had transformed into controlled chaos, bridesmaids in pale blue gowns, the wedding planner checking her tablet every 30 seconds, the hair and makeup team making final adjustments. Everett delivered champagne, removed empty glasses, and stayed invisible while watching everything. Elvin emerged from her suite at 11:30, and the hallway fell silent. The wedding dress transformed her into something ethereal. The silk bodice fitted perfectly, the lace sleeves delicate as spiderweb, the train flowing behind her like a waterfall of pearls. Her dark hair had been swept into an elegant updo, her makeup flawless, her expression serene. She looked like a princess from a fairy tale. She looked utterly miserable. "Perfect," the wedding planner declared, snapping photos with her phone. "Absolutely perfect. Mr. Graymore will meet you at the top of the stairs in 15 minutes. The ceremony begins at noon sharp." The bridesmaids fluttered around Vivienne, adjusting her train, exclaiming over her beauty, and Everett saw that she'd stopped really seeing any of them. Her eyes had gone distant, resigned. This was it, the final countdown to a marriage that would destroy her. Everett set down his tray on a side table and made his decision. He had nothing to lose but a job he could replace. Elvin had everything to lose, her freedom, her fortune, her future. As the bridesmaids filtered toward the main staircase, and the wedding planner rushed ahead to coordinate the processional, Everett found himself alone in the hallway with Elvin for just a moment. "Miss Ashford," he said quietly. She turned, seeming to really see him for the first time that morning. "Everett, thank you for everything today." "Don't marry him." The words hung between them like a bomb. Vivienne's eyes widened. "What?" "I know it's not my place. I know you don't know me and you have no reason to trust me, but I heard Senator Carmichael in the library this morning. I heard what he said about you, about your money, about his campaign. This isn't a marriage, Miss Ashford. It's a business transaction, and you're the commodity." Color drained from Vivienne's face. You were listening." "I was worried. I've been worried since the day I started working here and saw how you looked at him. My sister was in a relationship like this once. I didn't speak up soon enough, and she paid the price for years. I won't make that mistake again." Vivienne's hands were shaking now, the elaborate bouquet trembling. "Even if what you're saying is true, what am I supposed to do? 500 people are waiting downstairs. My father." "Your father doesn't have to live your life. Neither does anyone else. Miss Ashford, I know what I'm asking is impossible, but I also know that walking down those stairs and marrying that man is worse. Trust me." Footsteps sounded on the stairs. Richard Ashford's voice called out, "Vivienne, are you ready?" Elvin looked at Everett, then toward her father's voice, then back at Everett. In her eyes he saw a war being waged, duty against desire, fear against freedom. "What would I even do?" she whispered desperately. "Where would I go?" Richard Graymore appeared at the top of the stairs, resplendent in his morning suit, his expression expectant. "Vivienne, it's time. The guests are seated, Bradley is waiting. Let's not keep everyone in suspense." Everett looked at Vivienne, then at Richard Ashford, then back at Vivienne. And in that moment, seeing the trapped desperation in her eyes, he made the most reckless decision of his life. "Hide in the trunk," he whispered urgently. "My car, service parking lot, 5 minutes." Elvin stared at him like he'd lost his mind. Maybe he had. But sometimes sanity meant watching someone walk into disaster and doing nothing. Sometimes the only sane response to an insane situation was to do something equally insane. "Vivienne," Richard's voice held an edge of impatience now. She looked at her father, then at Everett, and for one terrible moment, Everett thought she would choose duty over freedom. Thought she would walk down those stairs and marry a man who saw her as nothing more than a well-dressed ATM. Then something shifted in her expression, a spark of defiance that must have been buried deep, waiting for permission to emerge. "Tell him I need 2 more minutes," Elvin said to the wedding planner who had appeared beside Richard. "Last-minute bride jitters. I need a moment." The wedding planner frowned but nodded, ushering a confused Richard Graymore back down the stairs while reassuring him that all brides needed a final moment alone. The instant they were gone, Elvin grabbed Everett's arm. "Are you serious?" she demanded. "You want me to run away from my own wedding in the trunk of your car?" "I want you to have a choice," Everett said simply. "Right now you don't have one. In 5 minutes, if you decide this is crazy and want to come back, I'll drive you straight back. No one will even know you left. But if you want out, if you want a chance to think clearly without 500 people and your father and Bradley all pushing you towards something you don't want, then yes, hide in the trunk." Elvin looked at her reflection in the hallway mirror, the perfect bride, the dutiful daughter, the ornamental wife-to-be. Then she kicked off her designer heels. 5 minutes, she said, service parking lot. And just like that, the wedding of the century was about to become the scandal of the decade. Everett moved through the mansion's corridors with practiced efficiency, his heart hammering so hard he was certain everyone could hear it. He just convinced a billionaire heiress to abandon her own wedding. In about 3 minutes, all hell was going to break loose. He took the servants' staircase down to the ground floor, then slipped out the side entrance that staff used to access the service parking lot. His car, a 10-year-old Honda Civic that had seen better days, sat in the far corner, deliberately positioned away from the gleaming luxury vehicles that filled the main lot. Everett popped the trunk, thanking whatever deity watched over fools and waiters that he'd cleaned it out last week. He pulled out the emergency blanket he kept there and spread it across the bottom, then grabbed his gym bag and tossed it into the back seat. The trunk wasn't spacious, but it would work for the short drive he had in mind. If she actually came. Everett checked his watch. 2 minutes had passed. Somewhere inside, Richard Graymore was probably growing impatient. The wedding planner was likely having a minor stroke. Bradley Carmichael was standing at the altar, completely unaware that his carefully orchestrated future was about to implode. Movement caught his eye. Elvin Graymore emerged from the side entrance, still in her wedding dress, the train bundled in her arms like a captured cloud. She'd somehow managed to navigate the stairs without tripping, and Everett had to admire her determination even as he questioned both their sanity. "This is insane," she said, reaching the car. Her voice trembled, but her jaw was set with determination. "This is absolutely insane." "Yes, ma'am, it is," Everett agreed, gesturing to the open trunk. "But sometimes insane is better than impossible." Elvin looked at the trunk, then at the mansion behind her, where 500 guests waited and her father was undoubtedly seconds away from sending someone to check on her. Everett could see the moment she made her final decision. Her shoulders straightened, her chin lifted, and she climbed into the trunk with as much dignity as one could muster while wearing several $1,000s worth of designer wedding gown. "How do you feel about wrinkles?" Everett asked, trying to arrange the voluminous dress so he could close the trunk. "Right now, I don't care if the entire thing turns to rags." Vivienne's voice was muffled by layers of silk and lace. "Just, please tell me you have a plan beyond driving in circles until my father's security team hunts us down." Everett closed the trunk as gently as possible, then slid into the driver's seat. His hands shook as he started the engine. "I have the beginning of a plan. The details are still developing." He pulled out of the parking lot slowly, carefully, just another staff member leaving after completing his shift. The security guards at the main gate barely glanced at him. They were too busy managing the arriving guests and keeping the media at bay. Within 60 seconds, Everett's Civic had merged onto the country road that led away from the Graymore estate. In the rearview mirror, the mansion grew smaller. They'd actually done it. Everett drove for 10 minutes, putting distance between them and the inevitable chaos, before pulling into a rest stop off Highway 29. He parked in the far corner, away from the few other cars, and quickly moved to open the trunk. Elvin blinked up at him, her carefully styled hair now slightly disheveled, her makeup still perfect despite everything. "Are we far enough away that I can breathe properly again?" Everett helped her out, and she stood there in the rest stop parking lot, a vision in white silk and lace, looking completely surreal against the backdrop of highway signage and vending machines. "You can breathe," Everett confirmed, "but we need to keep moving. They'll have noticed you're missing by now." As if on cue, Everett's phone buzzed in his pocket. He pulled it out to see multiple missed calls from the estate's main number and several texts from other staff members. "Where are you? Chef Pierre is looking for you. Something happened with the bride. Everyone's freaking out." Vivienne's phone, which she'd somehow managed to keep in a hidden pocket of her dress, was lighting up like a Christmas tree. She stared at it, then powered it off completely. "No going back now," she whispered. They stood there for a moment, the reality of what they'd done settling over them like a weight. Everett barely knew this woman. 24 hours ago, she'd been just another wealthy client, and he'd been just another invisible staff member. Now they were fugitives from a wedding, and Everett had thrown away his job, his reputation, and possibly his freedom to help someone he'd exchanged maybe 50 words with over 3 months. "I should tell you something," Everett said, leaning against his car. "I'm not a hero. I'm not some knight in shining armor. I'm a 37-year-old waiter who's worked a dozen different jobs, none of them impressive. I live in a studio apartment in Richmond. I drive a car that's held together by hope and duct tape. The most rebellious thing I'd done before today was giving someone decaf when they ordered regular because they were rude to the busboy." Elvin looked at him, really looked at him, for the first time not as service staff but as a person. Everett felt suddenly self-conscious under her gaze. He was average height, average build, with the kind of face that people forgot 5 minutes after meeting him, which had always been an asset in his line of work. His hair was starting to gray at the temples, and he had the permanent, tired look of someone who'd worked double shifts to make rent. "Why did you do this?" Elvin asked. "You didn't have to say anything. You could have just stayed silent, stayed safe." Everett thought about his sister, Sarah. Thought about the night he'd gotten her call, her voice broken and scared, begging him to come get her. Thought about the bruises he'd seen, the excuses she'd made, the years of her life wasted on a man who'd systematically destroyed her self-worth. "My sister," Everett said quietly. "Her name is Sarah. 5 years ago, she was married to a man who seemed perfect on paper. Successful lawyer, came from a good family, said all the right things. It took me too long to see what was really happening. By the time I helped her get out, she'd lost so much of herself that it took years to find her way back. He met Vivienne's eyes. When I started working at your estate, I saw the same signs. The way Bradley looked at you when he thought no one was watching. The way your father talked about you like you were a business asset instead of a daughter. The way you smiled for everyone else but never for yourself. And I swore I wouldn't make the same mistake twice. I wouldn't stay silent. Vivienne's eyes glistened with tears that she blinked back furiously. I don't even know what to say to that. You don't have to say anything, but we do need to figure out what to do next because, in about, Everett checked his watch. 5 minutes, your father is going to realize you're not coming back from your moment alone, and this is going to get very complicated very quickly. Elvin looked down at her wedding dress, then at Everett's humble Civic, then back at Everett himself. A laugh bubbled up from somewhere deep inside her. Not the polite, controlled laugh Everett had heard her use at parties, but something genuine and slightly hysterical. I'm standing in a rest stop off Highway 29 in a wedding dress that costs more than most people's cars. I just abandoned my own wedding, and my only ally is a waiter I barely know who drives a Honda held together by duct tape. She laughed harder, and Everett couldn't tell if she was heading toward breakdown or breakthrough. My father is going to kill me. Bradley is going to kill me. The media is going to have a field day. Probably, Everett agreed. But you're not married to a man who sees you as a walking checkbook, so there's that. Vivienne's laughter faded, replaced by something more serious. You heard him in the library. What exactly did Bradley say? Everett hesitated. The words had been harsh, cold, calculating, but Elvin deserved the truth. He was on the phone with someone, Stephen, I think, talking about the prenup, about how once you were married, he'd have access to your trust fund. He called you ornamental, said you'd been groomed to be beautiful, wealthy, and silent. Everett watched Vivienne's face carefully. He said your father was desperate to secure his legacy through political connections and would marry you to a statue if it had the right last name. Elvin closed her eyes, swaying slightly. Everett reached out to steady her, acutely aware that this was probably the first time he'd ever actually touched her beyond a handshake. I knew, she whispered. Part of me always knew, but hearing it confirmed. She opened her eyes, and Everett saw something fierce and determined there. My mother died when I was 8, cancer. After that, it was just my father and me. And he loved me, I know he did. But somewhere along the way, I stopped being his daughter and became his legacy project. Every school I attended, every friend I made, every interest I developed, all of it was curated, managed, optimized for maximum social advantage. She pulled away from Everett, packing in her elaborate gown. I went to Wellesley because that's where Graymore women go. I majored in art history because it was appropriate for a woman of my standing. I joined the right clubs, attended the right parties, dated the right men, always with my father's approval. And then Bradley came along, and my father saw everything he'd ever wanted. Political power, social elevation, a merger of dynasties. What did you see? Everett asked. Elvin stopped packing. A man who was handsome and charming and said the right things. A man my father approved of, which meant I must be making the right choice. A man who made me feel, she struggled for the word, nothing, absolutely nothing. No butterflies, no excitement, no connection, just acceptance. This is what my life is supposed to be, so I should accept it. And now I'm terrified, Elvin admitted. I have no idea what I'm doing. I've never made a real decision in my life without consulting my father, without considering how it would affect the family reputation, without calculating the social cost. I don't even know who I am without all of that. Everett's phone buzzed again. This time it was a call from an unknown number. He let it go to voicemail, but the message was clear. They were running out of time. We need to move, Everett said. My apartment is 2 hours away in Richmond. It's small and definitely not what you're used to, but it's safe and no one would think to look for you there. At least not immediately. Richmond, Elvin repeated, as if testing the word. I've lived in Virginia my entire life, and I've never actually been to Richmond except for state functions with my father. It's a city, Everett said with a slight smile. People live there, some of them quite happily despite not being billionaires. Elvin looked at him, and something in her expression shifted. You're making jokes. The world as we know it is ending, and you're making jokes. Humor is a coping mechanism, Everett said. Plus, if we don't laugh, we'll probably cry, and I feel like you've done enough crying. I haven't cried yet, Elvin said. No, but you've wanted to, I can tell. They stood there in the rest stop parking lot, an unlikely pair bound together by a single, impulsive decision. Everett knew he should be panicking. He just helped a billionaire's daughter flee her own wedding, would certainly be fired and possibly arrested, and had involved himself in what was guaranteed to become a media circus. But looking at Vivienne, seeing the first hints of genuine emotion breaking through her carefully maintained facade, Everett felt something he hadn't felt in years, the certainty that he'd done the right thing. Okay, Elvin said finally. Richmond, your apartment, but first, she gestured to her dress. I can't exactly walk around in this. Please tell me you have something I can change into. Everett thought about his gym bag in the back seat. I have basketball shorts and a t-shirt that says, Virginia is for lovers. Elvin laughed, that same genuine laugh from before. Perfect. Absolutely perfect. From Vera Wang to tourist merchandise. My father would die. Your father is probably already having a heart attack, Everett pointed out. The wedding was supposed to start 15 minutes ago. Vivienne's smile faded slightly, but she didn't look back toward the direction of the estate. Instead, she opened the back door of the Civic and grabbed Everett's gym bag. Is there somewhere I can change? She asked. Everett pointed to the rest stop building. Bathrooms over there. Might want to be quick about it, though. A woman in a wedding dress tends to attract attention. Elvin hurried toward the building, her train trailing behind her like a comet's tail. Everett watched her go, then pulled out his phone to check the damage. 23 missed calls, 37 text messages, and now a voicemail from a number he recognized, Richard Ashford's personal cell phone. Everett's finger hovered over the play button. Part of him wanted to hear it, wanted to know exactly how much trouble he was in. But another part, the part that had just helped Elvin escape, knew that listening would only make him second-guess everything. He deleted it without playing it. 5 minutes later, Elvin emerged from the rest stop building, and Everett had to suppress a laugh. The basketball shorts hung loosely on her slender frame, cinched tight with the drawstring. The t-shirt was 3 sizes too big, drowning her slight figure. Her carefully styled hair was coming loose from its pins, and her makeup, while still flawless, now seemed incongruous with her casual outfit. She looked absolutely ridiculous. She also looked happier than Everett had ever seen her. Don't say a word, Elvin warned, but she was smiling. I'm aware I look absurd. You look free, Everett said honestly. Elvin clutched the bundled wedding dress to her chest, all that remained of the life she'd just abandoned. What do I do with this? There's a dumpster over there, Everett suggested. Elvin looked at the dress, at the thousands of dollars of silk and lace and hand-sewn pearls. Any normal person would have balked at throwing away something so valuable, but Elvin walked straight to the dumpster and tossed it in without hesitation. Goodbye, Mrs. Carmichael, she said to the dumpster. I hope we never meet. Everett couldn't help but grin, feeling better. Feeling terrified, Elvin corrected. But also, yes, better. Is that normal, to feel multiple contradictory emotions at once? I think it's called being human, Everett said. Something tells me you haven't had much practice at it. They got back in the car, and Everett pulled onto the highway heading toward Richmond. In the passenger seat, Elvin was quiet for a long moment, staring out the window at the Virginia countryside rolling past. Tell me about your sister, she said finally. Sarah, You said it took years for her to find her way back. Did she find her way back, I mean? Everett kept his eyes on the road, but his mind traveled back through the years. Yes and no. Sarah's doing better now. She's a teacher, has a small house in Charlottesville, just got engaged to a genuinely good guy who treats her like she hung the moon. But there are still scars. Still moments when she flinches at raised voices or apologizes for things that aren't her fault. The damage, it doesn't just disappear. How long was she married to him? 3 years, but she'd been dating him for 2 years before that. 5 years total of slowly losing herself. Elvin was quiet again, processing. How did you get her out? She called me one night, 2 in the morning. She'd locked herself in the bathroom because he'd lost his temper over something trivial. She'd bought the wrong brand of coffee or something equally ridiculous. She was sobbing so hard I could barely understand her, but she finally said the words I'd been waiting to hear. I need help. Everett's hands tightened on the steering wheel, remembering that night. The 2-hour drive to her house, running every red light, convinced he'd arrived to find something terrible had happened. The way Sarah had looked when she'd opened the door, small, broken, terrified. I packed her things while he was passed out drunk, Everett continued. Threw everything into my car. We were gone before sunrise. She stayed with me for 6 months while she got the divorce, got therapy, started rebuilding. It was hard. She wanted to go back a dozen times. Kept saying maybe she was overreacting, maybe she'd been too sensitive, maybe if she just tried harder. But she didn't go back, Elvin said softly. No, she didn't go back. And eventually she started to remember who she was before him, started to laugh again, started to believe she deserved better. Everett glanced at Vivienne. That's why I couldn't stay silent with you, because I saw the same pattern and I knew how it ended. Bradley never hit me, Elvin said. He never even raised his voice to me, really, just controlled. Everything had to be his way. My schedule, my wardrobe, who I spent time with. He'd phrase it as suggestions, as concern, as wanting what was best for me. But underneath it was always the same message. You don't know what's good for you, but I do. Everett nodded. Control doesn't always look like violence. Sometimes it looks like love. That's what makes it so dangerous. They drove in silence for a while, the highway unwinding before them. Everett's phone had stopped buzzing. Either they'd given up trying to reach him, or they were too busy dealing with the fallout of a vanished bride to worry about a waiter. Can I ask you something? Elvin said eventually. You can ask me anything. We're partners in crime now. Elvin smiled at that. Partners in crime, I like that. But her expression grew more serious. Why were you working at the estate? You said you've had a dozen different jobs. What were you doing there? Everett considered how much to share. Honest answer, I needed the money. Catering work pays better than most service jobs, and high-end events like the ones your father hosts pay even better. I've been saving up. For what? Culinary school, Everett admitted, feeling slightly embarrassed. I know it's ridiculous, a 37-year-old man wanting to become a chef, but I've always loved cooking, and I'm actually pretty good at it. I've been working toward having enough saved to enroll in a program in Charlotte. Another year or so, and I would have had it. Would have had it, Elvin caught the past tense. Well, I'm pretty sure I'm fired now, Everett said wryly, and possibly blacklisted from every high-end venue in Virginia, so the savings plan might need some adjustment. Elvin turned to look at him fully, and Everett could feel the weight of her gaze. You gave up your savings plan for me, for someone you barely know. I gave up a job, Everett corrected. The savings are still there. I'll just have to find another way to add to them. Everett, you helped me escape my wedding. My father has connections everywhere. He's probably already making sure you'll never work in this state again. Everett had considered that, had tried not to think too hard about the professional consequences of his actions. Maybe, but I'd rather be unemployed with a clear conscience than complicit in watching you make the biggest mistake of your life. Elvin shook her head slowly, something like wonder in her expression. I don't understand you. We barely know each other. You owed me nothing. You had everything to lose. And yet here we are, Everett finished. Sometimes people do the right thing not because it makes sense, but because it's right. My mom used to say that. She was a hospice nurse, spent her whole life caring for dying strangers because she believed everyone deserved dignity and compassion at the end. She taught me that kindness isn't transactional. You don't help people because you'll get something out of it. You help because that's what humans are supposed to do for each other. Your mother sounds like an amazing person. She died 4 years ago, cancer like your mother. I'm sorry, Elvin said softly. They fell into a comfortable silence, the kind that happens when two people have unexpectedly bared parts of their souls to each other. Everett had shared more about himself in the last hour than he typically shared with people he'd known for years. There was something about the surreal nature of their situation that stripped away the usual social barriers. As they approached Richmond's outskirts, reality began creeping back in. Everett's phone lit up again, this time with a news alert. Breaking: Ashford Carmichael wedding postponed under mysterious circumstances. It's starting, Elvin said, reading the alert over his shoulder. The media circus. Do you regret it? Everett asked, running. Elvin was quiet for a long moment, and Everett prepared himself for the possibility that she might ask him to turn around, to take her back, to undo everything they'd done. Instead, she said, no, I don't regret it. I'm terrified of what comes next, and I have no idea how I'm going to face my father or explain this to the world. But for the first time in my entire life, I made a choice that was completely mine. Not my father's, not Bradley's, not society's. Mine. How could I regret that? Everett felt something warm bloom in his chest. Relief, pride, and something else he couldn't quite name. Good, he said. Because we're about to enter the next phase of this adventure, and it's probably going to get messier before it gets better. Next phase? Elvin asked. Everett took the exit toward his neighborhood, a modest area of Richmond that was neither wealthy nor poor, just solidly middle class and unremarkable. Next phase: figuring out what you actually want, who you actually are, what your life looks like when you're the one making the decisions. Elvin looked out at the unfamiliar streets, the ordinary houses, the normal people living normal lives. I don't even know where to start. That's okay, Everett said, pulling onto his street. You don't have to figure it all out today. Right now, we just need to get you somewhere safe where you can breathe and think without 500 people watching and judging. He pulled into the parking lot of his apartment complex, a 3-story building that had seen better days but was clean and well-maintained. Everett lived on the 2nd floor, in a studio apartment that was exactly as small as he described. Welcome to your temporary hideout, Everett said, grabbing his gym bag from the back. It's not the Graymore estate, but it has running water and a door that locks. Elvin stepped out of the car, still wearing his oversized basketball shorts and t-shirt, her expensive shoes left behind somewhere in the chaos of the morning. She looked up at the building, and Everett waited for the inevitable comparison, the judgment, the realization of just how far she'd fallen from her ivory tower. Instead, Elvin smiled. It's perfect, she said, absolutely perfect. And for the first time since Everett had started working at the Graymore estate 3 months ago, he saw Elvin Graymore look genuinely, authentically happy. Everett's apartment was everything Vivienne's life had never been: small, simple, and utterly unremarkable. One room serving as bedroom, living room, and office space. A kitchenette separated by a breakfast bar. A bathroom barely large enough to turn around in. The furniture was mismatched but comfortable. A worn couch that had clearly seen better days, a bed pushed against the far wall, a small dining table with 2 chairs. But it was clean, organized, and unmistakably a home, rather than a showpiece. Elvin stood in the center of the room, slowly turning to take it all in. Everett watched her nervously, acutely aware of how modest his living situation must seem to someone who'd grown up in a mansion with more bathrooms than he had rooms. "I know it's not much," he started. "It's honest," Elvin interrupted, running her hand along the back of the couch. "Everything here serves a purpose. Nothing is just for show." She picked up a framed photograph from the small bookshelf, Everett and a woman who looked like him, both laughing at something off camera. "Is this Sarah?" "Yes, that was taken last year at her engagement party. That's Kevin, her fiancé, taking the picture. He's good for her, makes her laugh." Elvin studied the photo with an intensity that suggested she was seeing something more than just an image. "You can see it in her eyes. She's genuinely happy." "She is now," Everett confirmed. "It took time, but she got there." Elvin carefully set the photo back in its place, then moved to the window overlooking the parking lot. The view was decidedly unglamorous: other apartment buildings, a few trees, ordinary cars in ordinary spaces. No manicured gardens, no fountains, no security gates. "I can hear the traffic," Elvin said, sounding almost delighted. "And is that someone's music?" From the apartment below came the muffled bass of someone's stereo, playing what sounded like classic rock. Everett had complained about it a few times, but his neighbor was a retired Vietnam vet who kept to himself and occasionally brought Everett homemade cookies, so he'd learned to live with it. "That's Mr. Hendrix. He's convinced Led Zeppelin sounds better at high volume. Sorry about that." "Don't apologize," Elvin said, still looking out the window. At the estate, everything was always so quiet, controlled. Even the sounds were curated. Classical music in the morning, jazz in the evening, silence everywhere else. "This is," she searched for the word, "alive. This feels alive." Everett's phone buzzed again, shattering the moment. He glanced at the screen and felt his stomach drop. 12 missed calls from Richard Graymore, 5 missed calls from Estate Security, 2 missed calls from Virginia State Police, and a text message from a number he didn't recognize. "Mr. Puller, this is Bradley Carmichael. I don't know what you think you're doing, but you've made a serious mistake. Elvin is unwell, clearly not thinking straight, and you've taken advantage of her confusion. Return her immediately and we might be able to resolve this without criminal charges. You have 1 hour." Everett felt cold. Criminal charges. Of course Bradley would frame it that way, not as a woman making her own choice but as a kidnapping, as Everett taking advantage. "What is it?" Elvin asked, noticing his expression. Everett handed her the phone wordlessly. Elvin read the message and her face went pale, then flushed with anger. Unwell, not thinking straight, taking advantage. She looked up at Everett. "He's going to claim you kidnapped me, isn't he?" "It's a smart play from his perspective," Everett said, trying to keep his voice steady. "Protects his reputation, makes you look like a victim instead of someone who chose to leave, and gives him legal leverage to force you back." "But I wasn't kidnapped," Elvin said fiercely. "I chose this. I chose to leave." "Your father and Bradley don't care about that. They care about controlling the narrative." Everett ran his hand through his hair, the reality of their situation finally hitting him full force. "Vivienne, I need you to understand something. I'm a black man who just helped a wealthy white woman disappear from her own wedding. No matter what the truth is, that's going to be a very difficult story for people to believe, especially when the people controlling the story have money, power, and political connections." Vivienne's eyes widened as she processed what he was saying. The racial dynamics that Everett had been acutely aware of from the moment he'd whispered, "Hide in the trunk," but had pushed aside in the urgency of the moment. "Oh God," Elvin breathed. "Everett, I didn't even think. I was so focused on getting away that I didn't consider what this could mean for you, what they could do to you." "I knew what I was risking," Everett said. "I just thought we'd have more time before they played that card." Elvin paced the small apartment, her mind clearly racing. "We need to tell the truth. We need to go public with what really happened, with what I heard Bradley say." You didn't hear what Bradley said, Everett interrupted gently. I did. It's my word against the senators, and without proof. Then I'll tell them I wanted to leave, that you just helped me. Will they believe you? Or will they assume you're confused, manipulated, experiencing a breakdown? Bradley already planted that seed in his text. He's setting up the narrative that you weren't in your right mind. Elvin stopped packing, her fists clenched at her sides. So what do we do? Just wait for them to show up and arrest you. Let them drag me back to the estate and force me to marry Bradley. They can't force you to marry anyone, Everett said. You're 28 years old. Legally, you can make your own choices. You don't know my father, Elvin said bitterly. Legal and possible are two different things in Richard Ashford's world. He'll have teams of lawyers, doctors willing to sign psychiatric evaluations, media contacts ready to spin whatever story serves him best. By the time he's done, the narrative will be so twisted that the truth won't matter. Everett believed her. He'd seen enough of Richard Ashford's operation to know the man wielded influence like a weapon. Then we need to get ahead of the narrative, Everett said, an idea forming. We need proof that you left willingly, that you're making rational decisions, and we need it documented before your father can control the story. How? Everett pulled out his phone, opened the camera app, and handed it to Vivienne. Record a video. Right now. State clearly that you left your wedding of your own free will, that I didn't coerce you or kidnap you, and that you're safe. Be specific about why you left. Mention what I overheard Bradley saying. Explain your father's control. Make it clear this was your decision. Then we'll email it to someone trustworthy who can verify the timestamp. Elvin took the phone, her hands shaking slightly. Who would we send it to? Everett thought, who do you trust? Anyone outside your father's influence? Elvin considered. My mother's sister, Aunt Catherine. She and my father had a falling out years ago over how he was raising me. She thought he was too controlling, tried to intervene, and he cut her off from seeing me. I haven't spoken to her in 10 years, but, she looked up. She tried to help me once. Maybe she'd help me again. Do you have her contact information? It's in my phone, which I turned off. Elvin pulled out her expensive smartphone, the one piece of her old life she'd kept. Don't turn it on, Everett said quickly. The second you do, they can track your location. Do you remember her email address? Elvin closed her eyes, thinking. Catherine Ashford Mitchell@gmail.com. She was so proud of hyphenating her name when she married Uncle James. My father hated it, said it was pretentious. Everett smiled slightly. Your aunt sounds like my kind of person. He positioned the phone camera to face Vivienne. Ready. Elvin smoothed down the oversized t-shirt, pushed her disheveled hair back from her face, and took a deep breath. She looked terrified but determined, a woman standing at the edge of a cliff, about to jump. Ready, she said. Everett hit record. My name is Elvin Claire Ashford, she began, her voice shaky but growing stronger. Today is Saturday, June 15th, 2026. It's approximately 1:30 p.m. This morning, I was supposed to marry Senator Bradley Carmichael at my father's estate in a ceremony that had been planned for 18 months. She paused, collecting herself. I didn't show up for that wedding because I chose not to marry Bradley. This wasn't a breakdown or a moment of confusion. This was the first clear decision I've made in years. Everett Puller, a member of the catering staff at my father's estate, overheard Bradley on the phone this morning discussing me in terms that made it clear he was marrying me for access to my trust fund and political advantage. When Everett warned me about what he'd heard, I made the decision to leave. Vivienne's voice grew firmer, more confident. Everett didn't kidnap me. He didn't coerce me. He offered me a choice, something no one else in my life has done in a very long time. I chose to take that chance. I chose to get in his car. I chose to leave behind a wedding to a man I didn't love and a life that wasn't mine. And I'm making this video because I know my father and Bradley will try to control this narrative. They'll say I'm unwell or confused or that Everett took advantage of me. None of that is true." She looked directly into the camera, and Everett saw steel in her expression. "I am Elvin Ashford. I am 28 years old. I am of sound mind, and I choose freedom over obligation. If anyone tries to claim otherwise, this video stands as proof of my real state of mind at the moment I made this decision. And Aunt Catherine, if you're watching this, I'm sorry it took me so long to find the courage you tried to give me 10 years ago." Everett stopped recording. They stood there in silence for a moment, the weight of what Elvin had just done settling over them. She'd gone public, or at least set the groundwork to go public. There was no taking it back now. "How do I look?" Elvin asked with a weak smile. "Like a sane person or like someone having a breakdown?" "You look like someone telling the truth," Everett said. He pulled up his email on his phone and attached the video. "Last chance to change your mind. Once I send this, it's out there." "Send it," Elvin said without hesitation. Everett sent the email to Catherine Graymore Mitchell, then forwarded a copy to his own email address as backup. The video was now time-stamped and documented. "Now what?" Elvin asked. Before Everett could answer, someone knocked on his apartment door. They both froze. The knock came again, harder this time. "Everett Puller, this is Officer Rodriguez with the Richmond Police Department. We need to speak with you." Everett and Elvin locked eyes. His heart hammered against his ribs. They'd found him faster than he'd expected. "What do we do?" Elvin whispered. Everett looked at the door, then at Vivienne, then at the video they'd just recorded. He thought about his sister, about the choice he'd made to help someone who needed it, about the difference between what was legal and what was right. "We tell the truth," he said, "and we hope it's enough." He moved to the door, Elvin right behind him, and opened it. Two police officers stood in the hallway. Officer Rodriguez, a woman in her 40s with kind eyes and a no-nonsense expression, and her partner, a younger man whose nameplate read Officer Chen. Behind them stood two men in expensive suits that screamed private security. "Mr. Puller," Officer Rodriguez said, "we received a report that you might have information about the whereabouts of Elvin Ashford, who went missing from her wedding this morning. Her family is very concerned about her welfare." Everett started to speak, but Elvin stepped forward. "I'm Elvin Ashford," she said clearly, "and I'm not missing. I'm exactly where I choose to be." Officer Rodriguez's eyebrows rose as she took in Vivienne's appearance, the oversized clothes, the disheveled hair, the bare feet. Everett could practically see her running through training scenarios in her head, trying to determine if this was a hostage situation or something else entirely. "Miss Ashford," Officer Rodriguez said carefully, "your father filed a missing persons report. He's very worried about you. Are you here of your own free will?" "Completely," Elvin said. "I left my wedding this morning because I chose not to marry Senator Carmichael. Everett helped me leave, but only after I made it clear that's what I wanted. I'm not being held against my will. I'm not in danger. I simply chose to exercise my right to not get married." Officer Chen spoke up, his tone skeptical. "Ma'am, you understand how this looks. You disappeared from your own wedding and now you're in a stranger's apartment wearing his clothes." "Everett isn't a stranger," Elvin interrupted. "He's someone who showed me kindness when I needed it most. And yes, I'm wearing his clothes because I didn't exactly plan my escape with a wardrobe in mind." One of the security men stepped forward. "Miss Ashford, your father sent us to bring you home. He's very concerned about your state of mind. Perhaps we should discuss this somewhere more private." "No," Elvin said firmly. "I'm not going back to the estate. Not today, possibly not ever, and my state of mind is perfectly clear." Officer Rodriguez held up a hand, silencing the security men. "Miss Ashford, I need to ask you some direct questions. Is that all right?" "Of course." "Are you here against your will?" "No." Has Mr. Puller threatened you in any way? No. Has he harmed you or coerced you? No, he's been nothing but respectful and helpful. Do you need medical attention? No. Do you feel safe right now? Elvin glanced at Everett and something passed between them. A moment of understanding, of trust, of partnership in the face of impossible odds. Yes, Elvin said. For the first time in a very long time, I actually feel safe. Officer Rodriguez nodded slowly, then turned to Everett. Mr. Puller, can you tell me your version of events? Everett took a breath and told the truth. About overhearing Bradley's phone conversation, about warning Vivienne, about her decision to leave, about helping her because he'd seen the same signs of control in her relationship that his sister had experienced. He left nothing out, knowing that honesty was his only defense. When he finished, Officer Rodriguez looked between them both, clearly processing. "This is highly irregular," she said finally. "But Miss Ashford, you're an adult. If you're stating clearly that you're here voluntarily and you're not in danger, then legally, there's nothing we can do to force you to return home." The security men looked frustrated. "Her father will want to speak with her." "Her father can call her phone like any other parent," Officer Rodriguez said firmly. "Miss Graymore has made it clear she doesn't wish to return to the estate at this time. That's her right." "Officer, you don't understand," one security man pressed. "Richard Graymore is a very powerful man. He has connections at the highest levels. If you don't bring his daughter back, then those connections can take it up with my captain," Officer Rodriguez said, her tone brooking no argument. "The law is clear. Miss Graymore is an adult making her own choices. We're not in the business of returning grown women to their fathers against their will. Have you ever had to choose between what everyone expected of you and what you knew was right for yourself? Share your story in the comments." Officer Chen looked less convinced. "What about the kidnapping allegations?" "There was no kidnapping," Elvin said. "I just recorded a video explaining exactly that. Would you like to see it?" "That won't be necessary right now," Officer Rodriguez said. "But Miss Ashford, I strongly suggest you contact your family directly and clarify the situation. The longer this goes on without clear communication, the more complicated it's going to get." "I understand," Elvin said. "Thank you, Officer Rodriguez." The security men looked like they wanted to argue further, but Officer Rodriguez gestured them toward the hallway. "Gentlemen, let's give Miss Graymore some space. You can report back to Mr. Graymore that his daughter is safe and here of her own choice." As the group moved toward the door, Officer Rodriguez turned back. "Mr. Puller, a word of advice. Document everything. Keep records of all communication. And Miss Ashford, whatever you're running from, make sure you're also running towards something. Freedom is only the first step." With that, they were gone. Everett closed and locked the door, then leaned against it, his legs suddenly weak. They just survived their first confrontation, but he knew it was only the beginning. Elvin stood in the center of the apartment, looking shell-shocked. "That actually worked. They believed me." "Officer Rodriguez believed you," Everett corrected. "Your father's security team doesn't, and neither will Bradley or your father. This isn't over." As if to punctuate his point, Everett's phone rang. He looked at the screen. Richard Ashford. Elvin saw the name and went pale. "Don't answer it." "I have to eventually," Everett said. "Ignoring him won't make this go away." He answered the call, putting it on speaker so Elvin could hear. "Mr. Puller," Richard Ashford's voice was cold, controlled, and absolutely furious. "I want my daughter returned immediately." "Mr. Ashford, Elvin is an adult. She's here of her own free will, as she just explained to the police officers you sent. I didn't kidnap her. I didn't coerce her. She made a choice." "Don't insult my intelligence," Richard snapped. "My daughter was about to marry a senator, about to fulfill her role in this family, and suddenly she decides to run off with a waiter. You clearly took advantage of her. Whatever you think you're going to get out of this, money, attention, your 15 minutes of fame, it won't work. I will destroy you. I will make sure you never work again. I will tie you up in legal proceedings for so long that you'll wish you'd never heard the Graymore name. Everett felt anger rising but kept his voice level. With all due respect, sir, your daughter is standing right here. Perhaps you should direct your concerns to her. There was a pause then. Vivienne, sweetheart, I know you're confused. This has been a stressful time and cold feet are normal, but we can fix this. Come home. We'll postpone the wedding, give you time to rest, and then we can. No, father. Vivienne's voice was quiet but firm. She moved closer to the phone. I'm not confused. I'm not having cold feet. I don't want to marry Bradley and I don't want to come home. Another pause, longer this time. When Richard spoke again, his voice had changed, still controlled but with an edge of something dangerous underneath. Elvin Claire Ashford, I have given you everything. The best schools, the best opportunities, the best life money could buy. I have protected you, guided you, invested in your future. And this is how you repay me. By running off with hired help and humiliating this family in front of 500 guests. You gave me everything except a choice, Elvin said, tears starting to stream down her face even though her voice remained steady. Every decision was yours. Every path was predetermined. My whole life has been in service of your vision, your legacy, your plans. When do I get to decide what I want? You're 28 years old. You think you know better than me. You think some waiter with a hero complex knows what's best for you. I think I need to figure that out for myself, Elvin said. And I can't do that living in your shadow, marrying the man you chose, fulfilling the destiny you designed. Richard's laugh was bitter. You want to figure things out for yourself. Fine. See how far you get without the Graymore name, without the money, without the connections. You want independence. Here it is. As of this moment, you're cut off. No access to your trust fund, no credit cards, no allowance, nothing. Let's see how long your little rebellion lasts when you're living in a studio apartment with a man who can barely pay his own rent. The line went dead. Elvin stared at the phone, her face white. Everett felt his stomach drop. He'd expected threats, expected legal action, even expected the police. But he hadn't expected Richard Graymore to actually disown his own daughter. Vivienne, Everett started. He really did it, Elvin whispered. He actually cut me off. She looked around the small apartment as if seeing it differently now, not as a temporary hideout but as her new reality. I have no money, no credit cards, no access to anything. I have literally nothing but the clothes on my back, which aren't even my clothes. Everett watched her process the enormity of what had just happened. She'd gone from billionaire heiress to penniless in the span of a phone call. You have your freedom, Everett said quietly. That's not nothing. Elvin looked at him and something in her expression shifted. The fear was still there, but beneath it was something else, determination, maybe even excitement. You're right, she said slowly. I have my freedom. For the first time in my life, I actually have a choice about what comes next. She laughed, a slightly hysterical sound. I'm completely broke, living in a stranger's apartment, wearing basketball shorts and wanted by the police, or at least by my father's security team. This is insane. Completely insane, Everett agreed. But it's mine, Elvin said. This disaster, this mess, this terrifying new reality, it's mine. I chose it. Everett couldn't help but smile. So what do you want to do with your disaster? Elvin thought for a moment, then smiled back. A real smile, the kind Everett had never seen on her face in all the months he'd worked at the estate. I want to order pizza, she said. I've never ordered pizza in my life. My father thought it was common. So I want to order pizza, and I want to figure out what happens next without anyone telling me what I should do. Everett pulled out his phone, opening a delivery app. What kind of pizza? I don't know. What do you recommend? For your first rebellion pizza. We're going all out. Extra cheese, pepperoni, mushrooms, and, just to really horrify your father, pineapple. Elvin laughed, genuine, unfettered laughter that filled the small apartment. Perfect, absolutely perfect. As Everett placed the order, he caught sight of their reflection in the window. A waiter and a runaway heiress, standing in a studio apartment, ordering pizza while the world they'd left behind exploded around them. It was absurd. It was impossible. It was probably going to end badly. But for the first time in a very long time, Everett felt like he was exactly where he was supposed to be. And looking at Vivienne's face, flushed with laughter, eyes bright with possibility despite everything, he suspected she felt the same way. The pizza would arrive in 30 minutes. They had no plan, no money, and no idea what came next. But they had each other, and right now, that felt like enough. The pizza arrived exactly 30 minutes later, delivered by a teenager who gave Vivienne's oversized outfit a curious glance but said nothing. Everett paid with cash from his wallet, acutely aware that every dollar now mattered more than it had that morning. They sat on the floor of the apartment, the pizza box between them on the coffee table, and Elvin stared at it like it was a foreign object. "You just open it and eat it?" she asked. Everett couldn't tell if she was joking. "Have you really never had pizza?" "I've had pizza," Elvin said defensively. "At catered events, on fine china, cut into small, appropriate pieces. I've never had," she gestured at the box, pizza from a box with my hands." Everett opened the box, releasing a cloud of steam and the smell of cheese and pepperoni. He grabbed a slice and took a bite, watching Elvin watch him. "It's not going to bite back," he said around a mouthful. "I promise." Elvin reached out tentatively, picked up a slice and took a small, careful bite. Her eyes widened. "Oh my God," she said. "This is amazing. Why did no one tell me pizza was this good?" "Because your father thought it was common," Everett reminded her, grinning. "Welcome to the common life. It has its perks." They ate in comfortable silence for a few minutes, and Everett found himself studying Elvin in this new context. Without the designer clothes, the professional makeup, the carefully styled hair, she looked younger, more vulnerable, but also somehow more real. The woman sitting across from him bore little resemblance to the composed heiress he'd served champagne to at countless events. "What are you thinking?" Elvin asked, catching him staring. "That you look different," Everett said honestly. "More yourself, maybe." "I don't even know who myself is," Elvin admitted. "That's the problem. For 28 years, I've been whoever my father needed me to be. The perfect daughter, the perfect hostess, the perfect future senator's wife. I've never had the chance to figure out who I'd be without all those expectations." "So now's your chance," Everett said. "Who do you want to be?" Elvin set down her pizza slice, considering the question seriously. "I don't know, isn't that pathetic? Most people figure that out in college during their 20s, but my college experience was just an extension of my father's control. I majored in art history because it was appropriate. I joined the clubs he suggested. I dated the boys he approved of. I never rebelled, never questioned, never pushed back." "Why not?" Everett asked gently. Elvin was quiet for a long moment. "Because my mother died when I was 8 and I was terrified of losing my father too. After she was gone, he was all I had. And he was devastated, consumed by grief and work. The only time he seemed to really see me was when I was being perfect, achieving something, making him proud. So I became whatever would keep his attention, keep his approval, keep him in my life." Everett felt a pang of sympathy. That's a lot of pressure for an 8-year-old. "I didn't see it as pressure then. I saw it as survival. And by the time I was old enough to recognize the pattern, I was so deep in it that I didn't know how to break free." Elvin picked at the crust of her pizza. "Do you know what's funny? My mother used to tell me stories about her life before she married my father. She was an artist, a painter, not particularly successful, but she loved it. She'd talk about living in a tiny apartment in Brooklyn, eating ramen noodles, staying up all night working on a piece. My father would laugh when she told those stories, like they were quaint memories from a past life. But I remember the way her eyes would light up. She was happy then. What happened to her art after she married your father? It became a hobby, something appropriate for a society wife. She'd paint occasionally, but always in the style my father's friends would appreciate. Always subjects that would photograph well for magazine spreads about the Graymore family. The passion was gone. Vivienne's voice grew quiet. Sometimes I wonder if that's what killed her. Not the cancer, but the slow death of giving up who she really was. Everett reached across the coffee table and squeezed her hand. The gesture felt natural, comfortable, despite the fact that 24 hours ago he wouldn't have dared touch Elvin Ashford. "You're not your mother," Everett said. "You got out, you made a choice." "A choice that's left me completely dependent on you," Elvin pointed out. "I have no money, no job skills, nowhere to go. I jumped out of one cage and into—" "What?" "Your very small apartment. That's not exactly freedom." "It's a start," Everett said. "And you're not dependent on me. We'll figure something out." "Like what?" "I don't have any marketable skills. I can plan a charity gala, discuss Renaissance art, and make small talk in 3 languages, but I've never had an actual job. I've never even filled out a job application." Everett considered this. "What do you actually like doing? Not what you were supposed to like, but what genuinely interests you." Elvin thought about it. "I used to love cooking. Not the formal dinner party kind, the actual cooking, experimenting with flavors, trying new recipes. But my father hired chefs for everything, and when I tried to cook myself, he'd say it was inappropriate for someone of my standing to do servant's work." Everett's eyes lit up. "You like cooking?" "I like creating things. The alchemy of taking simple ingredients and transforming them into something delicious. But I only got to do it when my father was traveling and the staff wasn't watching." Elvin smiled ruefully. "I used to sneak into the kitchen at 3 in the morning to bake. The chef would find mysterious cookies and pastries in the morning and never figured out where they came from." "That's perfect," Everett said, his mind already racing with possibilities. "How is that perfect?" "There's a significant difference between sneaking into a kitchen to bake cookies and actually supporting yourself." "My sister Sarah is a teacher," Everett said. "But before that she worked at a bakery while she was getting her life together after leaving her ex. She loved it, said it was therapeutic, working with her hands, creating something beautiful from scratch. The owner was always looking for reliable people. Maybe." "Everett, I can't ask you to get me a job," Elvin interrupted. "You've already done too much." "You're not asking, I'm offering. And it's not charity. If you can actually bake, Sarah's boss would be getting a good employee." Elvin looked uncertain. "I don't have any credentials, no culinary training, no work history." "But you have skills," Everett said, "and you're willing to work. That counts for something." Before Elvin could respond, Everett's phone rang. He glanced at the screen and felt his stomach drop. "It's Sarah," he said, answering. "Hey, sis." "Everett Puller, what the hell is going on?" Sarah's voice was frantic. "I just got a call from a detective asking questions about you. Something about a missing heiress. Please tell me you didn't do something stupid." Everett rubbed his forehead. "Define stupid." "Oh my God, you did do something stupid, Everett." Sarah calmed down. "It's not what it sounds like. The heiress isn't missing. She's sitting right here in my apartment eating pizza. She left her wedding of her own free will and I just helped." There was a long pause. "You helped a billionaire's daughter run away from her wedding." "When you say it like that, it sounds worse than it is." "How could it possibly sound worse? Everett, do you have any idea what kind of people you're dealing with? Richard Graymore has more lawyers than most cities have residents. If he decides you kidnapped his daughter—" "I didn't kidnap anyone," Everett said firmly. "Elvin is here voluntarily. She even recorded a video statement saying so. The police already came by and confirmed she's safe and here by choice." Another pause. "The police have already been to your apartment," It's been a complicated day. Everett, Sarah's voice softened. I know you're trying to help. I know you see something in this situation that reminds you of me and Travis, but this is different. These people have real power. They can make you disappear, not literally but professionally, financially, legally. You could lose everything. I know, Everett said quietly. But Sarah, you should have seen her. She was about to marry a man who sees her as a commodity. Her own father treats her like a business asset. Someone had to give her a choice. He heard Sarah sigh. You and your hero complex. You know that's going to get you in serious trouble one day. Pretty sure that day is today, Everett said with a weak smile. Is she really there? Can I talk to her? Everett looked at Vivienne, who nodded. He put the phone on speaker. Hi, Sarah, Elvin said. I'm sorry I dragged your brother into this mess. Did he give you a choice about dragging him in? Sarah asked. Not really, he just helped, without asking for anything in return. Yeah, that sounds like Everett. He's annoyingly noble that way. Sarah's tone became more serious. Vivienne, can I call you Vivienne? Please. Vivienne, I don't know your whole story, and I'm not going to judge your choices. God knows I've made enough questionable decisions in my life. But I need you to understand something. My brother has a savior complex the size of Virginia. He'll sacrifice everything to help someone he thinks needs it, even when it costs him more than he can afford. So if you're having second thoughts, if you think you might go back to your family, please do it now before he gets hurt worse than he already will be. Elvin looked at Everett, her expression serious. I'm not having second thoughts, and I don't want Everett to get hurt because of me. That's the last thing I want. Good, Sarah said. Because if you hurt him, billionaire, heiress or not, you'll have to deal with me, and I'm significantly less noble than my brother. Everett couldn't help but smile. Thanks for the character reference, Sarah. Someone has to keep you honest. Now what's your actual plan here? Because hide in Everett's apartment and eat pizza isn't sustainable long-term. Everett suggested I might be able to work at the bakery where you used to work, Elvin said. I know it's a long shot, but I do know how to bake, and I need to support myself somehow. There was a pause on Sarah's end. You want to work at Bella's bakery, like actually work there? If they'll have me, Elvin said. I know I don't have experience, but I'm willing to learn. I'm willing to do whatever it takes to make this work. Sarah was quiet for a moment, and Everett could practically hear her thinking. His sister was fiercely protective, but she was also pragmatic. If she thought this was a genuine request and not some rich girl playing at poverty, she'd help. Okay, Sarah said finally. I'll call Bella. She owes me a favor I covered for her when she had the flu last year. But Vivienne, you need to understand something. Bella doesn't care who your father is or how much money your family has. She cares about whether you show up on time, work hard, and treat her customers well. If you take this job, you're just another employee. No special treatment, no shortcuts. Can you handle that? I want that, Elvin said. I want to be treated like everyone else. Famous last words, Sarah muttered. But okay, I'll make the call. And Everett, please be careful, I mean it. These people play for keeps. I know, Sarah, thanks. After they hung up, Elvin looked at Everett with something like wonder. Your sister threatened me, a billionaire's daughter, and meant it. That's Sarah, Everett said with pride. She doesn't intimidate easily. I like her, Elvin said. She's protective of you. We're protective of each other. That's what family does. Vivienne's expression grew wistful. I wish I knew what that felt like. My father's version of protection was control, and I never had siblings to look out for me. Everett's phone buzzed with a text from Sarah. Bella says she can meet with Elvin tomorrow morning at 6 a.m. If she's serious, she needs to be there. No excuses, no exceptions. He showed the text to Vivienne. 6 a.m., that's early. I'll be there, Elvin said without hesitation. Where is it? About 3 miles from here. We can walk, it's a nice neighborhood. Walk, Elvin looked uncertain. I've never. I mean, my father always sent cars. I don't think I've walked 3 miles in my life." Everett smiled. "Then tomorrow will be full of firsts. First pizza, first job interview, first 3 mile walk. You're racking up the experiences." Elvin smiled back, but Everett could see the fear underneath. She was putting on a brave face, but the reality of what she'd done, what she'd given up, was starting to sink in. "Hey," Everett said gently, "second thoughts." "Constant thoughts," Elvin admitted. "Wondering if I've made a terrible mistake. Wondering what happens when my father's money and influence catch up with us. Wondering if I'm strong enough to actually build a life from nothing." She met his eyes. "But no, no second thoughts about leaving. That was the right choice." They finished the pizza in comfortable silence, and as the afternoon stretched into evening, Everett showed Elvin the basics of his apartment. How the shower worked, temperamental but functional. Where he kept the towels, clean ones, in the bathroom cabinet. How to work the TV remote, more complicated than it should be. "You can take the bed," Everett said. "I'll sleep on the couch." "Everett, this is your apartment. I can't take your bed." "You've had a significantly more stressful day than I have. You're taking the bed." Elvin looked like she wanted to argue but didn't have the energy. "Thank you for everything. I know I keep saying it, but I don't know how else to express." "You don't have to thank me," Everett interrupted. "We're partners in this, remember, partners in crime." As darkness fell over Richmond, Everett gave Elvin some privacy to shower and change into another set of his clothes, sweatpants, and a t-shirt that were slightly less oversized than the basketball shorts. He busied himself tidying up the apartment, trying not to think about the surreal fact that Elvin Graymore was currently in his bathroom, showering with his drugstore shampoo, about to sleep in his bed. His phone buzzed with another message, this time from an unknown number. "Mr. Puller, this is Catherine Mitchell, Vivienne's aunt. I received the video you sent. Thank God she got out. I've been trying to reach her for years, but Richard blocked all my attempts. Please tell her I'm here if she needs anything. I'm flying to Richmond tomorrow. We need to talk." Everett showed the message to Elvin when she emerged from the bathroom, her hair wet and hanging loose around her shoulders. She read it twice, tears springing to her eyes. "Aunt Catherine," she whispered, I thought she'd forgotten about me." "Sounds like she's been trying to reach you all along," Everett said. Elvin clutched the phone, rereading the message. "She's flying here, tomorrow, to see me." "Is that good?" "I think so. I don't know. I haven't seen her in 10 years. What if she's changed? What if my father got to her, convinced her I'm having a breakdown?" "Only one way to find out," Everett said. "But you don't have to face her alone. I'll be there if you want." Elvin nodded, looking vulnerable and young in his oversized clothes. "I want that. I want you there." They made plans to meet Catherine the next afternoon after Vivienne's interview at the bakery. Everett gave Elvin his bed as promised, and he settled on the couch with a pillow and blanket, listening to the sounds of the city outside, traffic, voices, the distant wail of a siren. He should have been sleeping. He had to be up in 5 hours to help Elvin prepare for her interview. But his mind raced, replaying the day's events, wondering what tomorrow would bring, calculating how long his savings would last if he couldn't find another job, worrying about what Richard Ashford's next move would be. "Everett," Vivienne's voice came from across the room. "Are you awake?" "Yeah, can't sleep." "Too much to think about." A pause. "Can I ask you something?" "Anything." "Why did you really do this? And don't say it's because of your sister. That's part of it, I know, but there's something else." Everett considered lying, giving her a simple answer that would satisfy without revealing too much. But they were past simple answers now. "Because I was tired," he said quietly. "Tired of being invisible. Tired of watching wealthy people treat others like furniture. Tired of knowing that people like me could work our entire lives and never have a fraction of what people like you were, take for granted. and tired of watching someone with every advantage in the world be completely miserable while pretending to be grateful. He paused, surprised by his own honesty. "I saw you at those parties," Everett continued. "You'd smile and laugh and play the perfect hostess, but your eyes were always somewhere else, somewhere far away. And I thought, what's the point of all that money, all that power, all those opportunities if you're still trapped? At least I'm free, even if I'm broke. But you had everything except the one thing that actually matters." "Which is?" Elvin asked softly. "Choice, agency, the ability to say this is my life and I'm going to live it my way." Silence stretched between them, comfortable and contemplative. "Thank you," Elvin said finally, "for seeing me when everyone else was too busy looking at my last name." "Thank you," Everett replied, "for being brave enough to choose yourself." They fell silent after that, and eventually Everett drifted into an uneasy sleep, filled with dreams of mansions crumbling and birds escaping golden cages. He woke to his phone alarm at 5:00 a.m., his back stiff from the couch but his mind clear. Today, Elvin would take her first steps toward building a real life. Today, she would learn whether freedom could survive contact with reality. Today, everything would change again. He just hoped they were ready for it. The pre-dawn streets of Richmond were quiet as Everett, and Elvin made their way toward Bella's bakery. Elvin had insisted on walking despite Everett's offer to drive, saying she needed to experience real life, even if real life meant sore feet and early morning humidity. She wore another borrowed outfit, jeans that Everett had to cinch with a belt and a plain black t-shirt. Her hair was pulled back in a simple ponytail, her face free of makeup. She looked nothing like the polished heiress from the society pages. She looked terrified. "It's just an interview," Everett said, knotting her white knuckles as she gripped the strap of the small backpack he'd lent her. "Bella's intimidating, but she's fair." "What if I mess up? What if I can't do this?" Vivienne's breath came quick and shallow. "Everett, I've never had a job interview. I don't know how to act, what to say." "Be honest," Everett interrupted gently. "Tell her you want to learn, that's all anyone can ask." They turned onto Maple Street, and Bella's bakery came into view, a modest storefront with cheerful yellow awnings and the warm glow of lights from within. Even from outside, Everett could smell fresh bread baking, a scent that reminded him why he'd fallen in love with cooking in the first place. Through the window, Everett could see Bella Morty already at work, her short gray hair covered by a bandana, her sturdy frame moving efficiently between ovens and prep stations. She was 62 years old, had owned the bakery for 30 years, and had a reputation for being tough but fair with her employees. Sarah had said Bella owed her a favor, but Everett knew his sister well enough to know she'd also told Bella exactly who Elvin was. This interview would be a test, not of Vivienne's baking skills, but of her character. Everett opened the door, triggering a cheerful bell. Bella looked up from the dough she was kneading, her sharp eyes taking in Elvin from head to toe. "You must be Vivienne," Bella said, her voice carrying a hint of her Italian heritage. "Sarah said you needed a job. She didn't mention you were Richard Ashford's daughter." "I'm just Vivienne," Elvin said, her voice stronger than Everett expected. "The Graymore part, that's not who I want to be anymore." Bella's eyebrows rose. "Not who you want to be, or not who you can afford to be now that Daddy cut you off." Everett winced at the bluntness, but Elvin didn't flinch. "Both," she said honestly. "I'm not going to pretend I didn't have every advantage in life until yesterday. I did. But those advantages came with a price I'm no longer willing to pay. So yes, I need this job because I need money to survive. But I also need it because I need to prove to myself that I can build something on my own." Bella studied her for a long moment, then nodded. "Fair answer. Come on back. Everett, you can wait out front." Everett caught Vivienne's panicked look but gave her an encouraging nod. She took a deep breath and followed Bella into the kitchen. For the next 45 minutes, Everett sat at one of the small tables in the bakery's dining area, watching the sunrise paint the street in shades of gold and pink. Occasionally, he heard Bella's voice from the kitchen, sharp questions, brief instructions, but he couldn't make out Vivienne's responses. His phone buzzed constantly. More calls from unknown numbers, text messages from other staff members at the estate asking what had happened, and a particularly long voicemail from Chef Pierre that Everett didn't bother listening to. The only message he opened was from Sarah. "How's it going? Is she surviving Bella's interrogation?" Everett texted back, "Still alive, that's something." At 6:47 a.m., Bella emerged from the kitchen, wiping flour from her hands. Elvin followed behind her, also dusted with flour, her face flushed but smiling. "She can start Monday," Bella announced. "Minimum wage 4 a.m. shifts, and if she's late even once, she's fired. No special treatment, no second chances. Understood?" "Understood," Elvin said quickly. "Thank you, Mrs. Morty. I won't let you down." "We'll see." Bella turned to Everett. "Your sister vouched for you both. Don't make her regret it." But there was something almost warm in her expression as she returned to her kitchen. Outside, Elvin grabbed Everett's arm, practically bouncing with excitement. "I got the job. I actually got a job." "I can see that," Everett said, grinning at her enthusiasm. "How did it go?" "She made me make croissants from scratch." "From scratch, Everett, no recipe, no instructions, just show me you know what you're doing." "And I did it. They weren't perfect. One was definitely lopsided, but Bella said they were acceptable, which Sarah told me is the highest praise Bella gives." Vivienne's joy was infectious, and Everett found himself laughing at her excitement over something so simple. 24 hours ago, she'd been preparing to marry a senator. Now she was celebrating a minimum wage job at a bakery. "I'm proud of you," Everett said, and he meant it. Vivienne's smile softened. "Thank you for believing I could do this. I'm not sure I believed it myself." They started walking back toward Everett's apartment, Elvin chattering about the kitchen, the recipes she'd discussed with Bella, the early morning hours she'd have to keep. Everett listened, enjoying her enthusiasm, trying not to think about his own employment situation, or lack thereof. They were 2 blocks from the apartment when Everett noticed the black SUV parked on the street. It was too clean, too expensive, too conspicuous for the neighborhood. "Vivienne," he said quietly, "don't look now, but I think someone's watching us." Vivienne's expression immediately tensed, but she didn't turn around. "My father's security." "Probably keep walking, act natural." They continued toward the apartment, and Everett saw the SUV pull away from the curb, following at a distance. Not hiding, but not approaching either. A message: "We know where you are." "They're going to follow me everywhere, aren't they?" Elvin said, her earlier joy evaporating. "Watch everything I do, report back to my father, wait for me to fail so they can drag me back." "Maybe," Everett admitted. "But you're an adult. They can watch, but they can't force you to do anything." They reached the apartment complex, and Everett checked over his shoulder. The SUV had parked across the street, windows tinted, occupants invisible but present. Inside the apartment, Elvin collapsed onto the couch, the adrenaline from her successful interview draining away. "What time is Aunt Catherine supposed to arrive?" Everett checked his phone. "She texted while we were at the bakery. She's already here, staying at the Marriott downtown. She wants to meet at noon at a cafe called the Daily Grind. It's public, neutral territory." 3 hours, Elvin said, looking at the clock. 3 hours until I see her again. What if she's disappointed in me? What if she thinks I'm making a mistake? "Then she tells you that, and you decide whether to listen," Everett said. "But from her message, it sounds like she's been trying to reach you for years. That doesn't sound like someone who's disappointed." Elvin nodded, but Everett could see the anxiety building. She'd been running on adrenaline since yesterday, fueled by the urgency of escape and survival. Now, with a moment to breathe. The full weight of what she'd done was settling on her shoulders. "I'm going to take a shower," Elvin said, standing abruptly. "Try to look presentable for Aunt Catherine." While Elvin was in the bathroom, Everett's phone rang. An unknown number, but something made him answer. "Mr. Puller." The voice was smooth, professional, and vaguely threatening. "My name is Gerald Hartwick. I'm an attorney representing Senator Bradley Carmichael." Everett's stomach dropped. "What do you want?" "I want to make you an offer. A generous offer, really, considering the legal jeopardy you're currently in. The senator is willing to forego any criminal charges if you simply facilitate a conversation between himself and Miss Ashford. Neutral location, supervised if you prefer. He just wants to speak with his fiancée and clear up this unfortunate misunderstanding." "She's not his fiancée," Everett said. "She chose not to marry him." "Yes, well, that's the misunderstanding we'd like to address. Miss Graymore has been under considerable stress, and the senator believes that if they could just talk, without outside influence, they could resolve this situation amicably." "Outside influence meaning me," Everett said flatly. "The senator is concerned that Miss Graymore may have been encouraged to make rash decisions by individuals who don't have her best interests at heart." Everett felt his temper rise. "I have more interest in Vivienne's well-being than a man who was planning to use her trust fund to finance his political campaign." There was a pause on the line. "I'm sorry, what was that?" Too late, Everett realized he'd just revealed what he'd overheard in the library. The one piece of concrete information that made Bradley look bad. "Nothing," Everett said quickly. "I'm not interested in your offer. Elvin doesn't want to talk to Bradley, and I'm not going to force her." "Mr. Puller, you're making this more difficult than it needs to be. The senator is prepared to be very generous, financially speaking. Whatever Miss Graymore is paying you to house her, we can triple it. And we can ensure that this unfortunate incident doesn't destroy your career prospects." "I'm not doing this for money," Everett said. "Everyone does everything for money, Mr. Puller. The only question is how much. Think about it. The senator's offer stands for 24 hours. After that, we'll have no choice but to pursue more aggressive legal options." The line went dead. Everett stared at his phone, his mind racing. Bradley's lawyer had just tried to bribe him, threatened him, and revealed that they were getting desperate. Good people with nothing to hide didn't send lawyers to offer bribes. But the mention of aggressive legal options made his blood run cold. Bradley had money, power, and political connections. If he decided to destroy Everett, he could do it easily. Elvin emerged from the bathroom, her wet hair braided, wearing yet another set of Everett's clothes. She took one look at his face and knew something was wrong. "What happened?" Everett told her about the call, watching her expression shift from confusion to anger to something that looked almost like guilt. "He's going to come after you," Elvin said. "Bradley won't let this go. His ego won't allow it. And my father—" She sank onto the couch. "Everett, I've put you in danger, real danger. Not just losing your job, but criminal charges, legal battles you can't afford to fight." "Vivienne." "You should take the money," she said suddenly. "Take Bradley's offer. Get whatever protection you can. I'll figure something else out." "No," Everett said firmly. "I'm not taking money from Bradley Carmichael. And I'm not abandoning you. We're in this together." "But why?" Vivienne's voice broke. "You barely know me. I'm not your responsibility. You don't owe me anything." Everett sat beside her on the couch, considering how to explain something he barely understood himself. "Do you remember what you said yesterday, about how your whole life had been decided by other people, how you'd never made a real choice?" Elvin nodded. "I spent 15 years being invisible," Everett said. "Moving through wealthy people's homes, serving their food, cleaning up their messes, watching them live lives I could never afford while treating people like me as if we didn't exist. And I accepted it because that's how the world works, right? Some people have power and some people don't, and you just survive the best you can. He met her eyes. But yesterday, when I heard Bradley talking about you like you were a commodity, something in me snapped. I realized I could keep being invisible and safe, or I could do something that mattered, even if it was risky, even if it was stupid. So I chose to matter. I chose to speak up, and I don't regret it. Elvin stared at him, tears streaming down her face. You're the bravest person I've ever met. Everett laughed. I'm terrified, Vivienne, absolutely terrified, but being brave doesn't mean not being scared. It means being scared and doing the right thing anyway. Before either of them could say more, someone knocked on the door. They both froze. Everett moved to the window and carefully looked out. His heart nearly stopped. Catherine Mitchell stood in the hallway, 3 hours early for their scheduled meeting. She was in her mid-50s, with dark hair streaked with gray, wearing jeans and a simple blouse. She looked like an older version of Vivienne, but with something in her expression that Elvin didn't have, a fierce independence, a refusal to be diminished. It's your aunt, Everett said. She's early. Elvin went pale. I'm not ready. I don't know what to say to her. Say the truth, Everett suggested. It's worked so far. With shaking hands, Elvin opened the door. Catherine took one look at her niece and burst into tears. Oh, Vivienne, she said, pulling the younger woman into a fierce hug. Oh, sweetheart, I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry I couldn't get to you sooner. I tried, baby girl, I tried for years, but your father blocked everything. Elvin sobbed into her aunt's shoulder, years of isolation and loneliness pouring out. Everett stepped back, giving them privacy, but Catherine caught his eye over Vivienne's head and mouthed 2 words. Thank you. They eventually moved inside, Catherine still holding Vivienne's hand like she might disappear if she let go. Everett made coffee, terrible instant coffee, but it was all he had, and they sat around the small dining table. I should explain why I'm early, Catherine said, her voice still thick with emotion. I flew in last night after I got Everett's email, but I didn't want to overwhelm you immediately. I planned to wait until noon like we agreed. But then, she pulled out her phone and showed them a news article. The headline made Everett's blood run cold. Senator Carmichael addresses runaway bride. ELVYNNE is ill, needs help. Below it was a photo of Bradley at a press conference, looking concerned and compassionate, flanked by doctors in white coats. No, Elvin whispered, reading the article. No, no, no. Everett read over her shoulder, his anger growing with each paragraph. Bradley had held a press conference that morning, explaining that Elvin had been struggling with mental health issues for months. He'd brought in 2 psychiatrists, both conveniently on his campaign's donor list, who explained that the stress of the wedding had triggered a breakdown. They discussed erratic behavior, poor judgment, and vulnerability to manipulation. They never mentioned Elvin by name, always referring to her as my fiancée or the patient, but everyone would know who they meant. The article concluded with Bradley's tearful plea. I love Vivienne, and I just want her to get the help she needs. If anyone knows where she is, please contact us immediately. She's not well, and she's with people who may not have her best interests at heart. He's weaponizing psychiatry, Catherine said, her voice hard with anger. Just like Richard did to me when I tried to intervene years ago. They'll have her declared mentally incompetent, force her into a psychiatric facility for evaluation. And by the time she gets out, they'll have convinced everyone, including Elvin herself, that she really is unstable. Can they do that? Everett asked, horrified. Can they really have her committed against her will? With enough money and the right connections. Absolutely, Catherine said. I've seen your father do it before, Vivienne. When business partners became problematic, when employees threatened to go public with information he wanted buried, he'd have them committed for 72-hour evaluations that somehow stretched into weeks or months. By the time they got out, their credibility was destroyed. Elvin looked stricken. He did that. My father actually did that to people. Your father is a dangerous man, sweetheart. I tried to tell your mother that before she died, but she wouldn't listen. She thought she could change him, soften him. Instead, he slowly eroded everything that made her who she was. Like her painting, Elvin said softly. Catherine looked surprised. You remember that. You were so young when she stopped. I remember she used to let me paint with her. We'd make messes and laugh, and she'd say that art didn't have to be perfect to be beautiful. Then one day, she just stopped. The studio was converted into a library, and she never painted again. Because Richard told her it was embarrassing, Catherine said, her voice bitter. That society wives didn't have hobbies that got their hands dirty, that she needed to focus on being an asset to his empire rather than pursuing childish dreams. He killed her spirit long before the cancer killed her body. The three of them sat in heavy silence, the weight of Richard Ashford's control settling over them like a shroud. I can't go back, Elvin said finally. I won't. Even if he has me declared incompetent, even if he convinces the world I'm crazy, I know the truth. I made a choice, and it was the right one. You're not going back, Catherine said firmly. I have lawyers, Vivienne, good ones, independent ones who don't owe your father any favors. I've been preparing for this for 10 years, waiting for the day when you'd finally break free. I have documentation of your father's history of coercive control, evidence of his business practices, testimony from people he silenced. We can fight him. But can we win? Everett asked. Catherine's expression grew serious. I don't know. Your father is very powerful and he's very determined to maintain control. But we have something he doesn't expect. We have the truth. And we have you, Vivienne, willing to stand up and tell your story. What about Bradley? Elvin asked. That press conference. He's painting himself as the concerned fiancé, me as the unstable woman who needs rescuing. How do we fight that narrative? Catherine smiled, and there was something almost predatory in it. We tell our own story, on our terms, and we have evidence that Bradley might not expect. She pulled a folder from her bag and spread several documents across the table. Everett recognized bank statements, phone records, and what looked like private investigator reports. I've been watching Bradley Carmichael since your father announced the engagement, Catherine explained. Something about him didn't sit right with me, too smooth, too perfect, too calculating. So I hired an investigator, and what we found. She tapped the documents. Bradley Carmichael is nearly $1 million in debt. Campaign expenses, gambling debts, loans from questionable sources. He needs money desperately, and marrying you was his solution. Everett leaned forward, studying the documents. This proves he had financial motives for the marriage. It corroborates what you overheard, Catherine agreed. Combined with your testimony, Vivienne's video statement, and these financial records, we can build a case that Bradley was marrying Elvin under false pretenses. It won't stop him from spinning the mental health narrative, but it will raise enough questions to create reasonable doubt. Elvin picked up one of the bank statements, her hands shaking. All of this was happening, and I had no idea. I was going to marry a man who saw me as nothing more than a financial solution, and I was too blind to see it. You weren't blind, Catherine said gently. You were trapped in a system designed to keep you from seeing clearly. Your father controlled your access to information, your relationships, your resources. You only knew what he wanted you to know. That's not blindness, Vivienne. That's manipulation. Looking back, have you ever realized someone was controlling your life in ways you didn't see at the time? Share your experience below. Your story might help someone else recognize the signs. Everett watched Elvin process this information, saw the moment when understanding shifted to determination. What do we do next? She asked Catherine. How do we fight back? Catherine began laying out a strategy, meetings with her lawyers, preparing a detailed statement of Vivienne's experiences, gathering more evidence of Richard's coercive behavior. It was complex, would take time, and had no guarantee of success. But it was something, a plan, a path forward. As Catherine talked, Everett's phone buzzed with a news alert. He glanced at it and felt his stomach drop. Breaking. Police investigate possible kidnapping in ASHFORD Carmichael case. The article detailed how Richard Graymore had filed an official kidnapping report with Virginia State Police, naming Everett specifically. They were describing him as a disgruntled employee who had groomed Elvin and coerced her into leaving. There was even speculation about a possible ransom demand. Everett showed the article to Catherine and Vivienne, his hands numb. "This is it," he said quietly. "This is how they're going to destroy me, not through lawyers or bribes, but by making me a criminal in the eyes of the public." Catherine read the article, her expression darkening. "This is Richard's specialty: control the narrative, destroy the opposition before they can mount a defense. He's counting on you panicking, on Elvin doubting her choices, on both of you crumbling under public pressure." "So what do we do?" Everett asked. "How do I prove I didn't kidnap her when the richest man in Virginia is telling everyone I did?" Catherine looked between them both, then made a decision. "We go public," she said. "Today, now. We hold our own press conference, show Vivienne's video statement, present our evidence, and tell the truth before Richard and Bradley can bury it under their lies. It's risky. We'll be putting everything on the table, exposing ourselves to scrutiny, but it's the only way to fight back." A press conference, Elvin looked terrified, in front of cameras, the media. "The same media that's currently broadcasting Bradley's lies about your mental health," Catherine pointed out. "The same media that's calling Everett a kidnapper. We either let them control the story or we take control ourselves." Everett felt his pulse racing. A press conference meant no more hiding, no more hopping. This would blow over quietly. It meant standing in front of the world and defending their choices, their truth, their very right to make their own decisions. It was terrifying. It was also exactly what they needed to do. "I'll do it," Elvin said, her voice stronger than Everett had ever heard it. "I'll tell my story, all of it. My father's control, Bradley's financial motives, everything. Let the world judge who's really telling the truth." Catherine turned to Everett. "You understand what this means for you. Once you go public, there's no going back. Your name, your face, everything about you will be scrutinized. Richard will dig up every mistake you've ever made, every vulnerability he can exploit. Are you ready for that?" Everett thought about his mother, who'd spent her life caring for strangers because she believed everyone deserved dignity. He thought about Sarah, who'd survived years of abuse and come out stronger on the other side. He thought about the choice he'd made yesterday morning to offer Elvin a chance at freedom. "I'm ready," he said. "Let's tell the truth." Catherine smiled, fierce and proud. "Then we have a press conference to arrange. And Vivienne, sweetheart, we need to get you something other than men's basketball shorts to wear. You're about to face the world and you should do it on your terms." For the first time since escaping her wedding, Elvin laughed, genuinely, joyfully laughed. "Aunt Catherine, I just got a job at a bakery making minimum wage. I can't exactly afford a new wardrobe." "Good thing I can," Catherine said, pulling out her credit card. "Consider it a late birthday present, for every birthday I missed over the last 10 years. As Catherine made phone calls to arrange the press conference, and Elvin looked through Catherine's phone for clothing options, Everett stepped onto the small balcony of his apartment. The black SUV was still parked across the street, a constant reminder of the forces arrayed against them. But for the first time since this whole thing started, Everett didn't feel afraid. He felt ready. Ready to fight. Ready to stand beside Elvin and tell the truth, consequences be damned. Ready to stop being invisible and start mattering. The midpoint revelation had arrived. This wasn't just about helping Elvin escape a bad marriage. This was about exposing a system of control and manipulation that had existed for years, that had destroyed lives and crushed spirits. This was about standing up to power and demanding the right to make their own choices. It was bigger than both of them now, and there was no going back. The press conference was scheduled for 4 p.m. at a downtown Richmond hotel, neutral territory that Catherine had arranged through her lawyers. In the hours leading up to it, Everett watched Elvin transform. Catherine had taken her shopping, returning with a simple but elegant navy dress, professional but not pretentious. A stylist Catherine knew had come to do Vivienne's hair and makeup, subtle, natural, designed to show a woman in control rather than one falling apart. But the real transformation wasn't physical. It was the steel Everett saw entering Vivienne's spine, the determination replacing the fear in her eyes. "Are you sure about this?" Everett asked her as they prepared to leave for the hotel. "Once we do this, there's no taking it back." Elvin adjusted the collar of her dress, meeting his eyes in the mirror. "I'm sure. My father spent my whole life teaching me that the Graymore name was everything, that reputation mattered more than truth, that appearances mattered more than reality. It's time to prove him wrong." The hotel conference room was packed when they arrived. Reporters from every major outlet, cameras everywhere, the air electric with anticipation. Everett felt his chest tighten as they entered through a side door, Catherine leading the way with the confidence of someone who'd navigated hostile press before. Richard Graymore was already there, Everett realized with shock. Standing in the back of the room with his own lawyers, his face a mask of controlled fury. Beside him stood Bradley Carmichael, looking every inch the concerned fiancé, flanked by the same doctors from his earlier press conference. This wasn't just a press conference, it was a confrontation. Catherine had set it up perfectly, invited both sides, forced everyone into the same room, ensured that whatever happened next would happen in full view of the media. "Ladies and gentlemen," Catherine began, standing at the podium with Elvin beside her, Everett slightly behind. "Thank you for coming. My niece, Elvin Ashford, has a statement to make regarding the events of yesterday and the allegations that have been made against her and Mr. Everett Puller." Elvin stepped forward, and Everett saw her hands tremble slightly before she steadied them on the podium. "My name is Elvin Ashford," she began, her voice clear and strong. "Yesterday morning, I was supposed to marry Senator Bradley Carmichael. I didn't. Not because I was kidnapped, not because I was having a mental breakdown, but because I chose not to marry a man who saw me as a commodity rather than a person." Cameras flashed, reporters leaned forward. In the back, Richard Ashford's face darkened. "For 28 years, I have lived my life according to other people's expectations," Elvin continued. "My father chose my schools, my friends, my interests, my career path, if you can call managing charity events a career. He chose Bradley Carmichael as my husband without ever asking what I wanted, and I went along with it because I'd been taught that obedience was love, that control was protection, that my role was to be beautiful, graceful, and silent." She paused, gathering strength. "But yesterday, Everett Puller, a waiter at my father's estate, overheard Senator Carmichael on the phone. He heard Bradley discuss me in terms that made it clear he was marrying me for access to my trust fund and political advantage. When Everett warned me, he gave me something no one else in my life has ever given me: a choice. The choice to walk away, the choice to say no, the choice to decide my own future." "That's a lie," Bradley shouted from the back, unable to contain himself. "Vivienne, sweetheart, you're not well. These people have manipulated you." "I have proof," Elvin cut him off, her voice sharp. She nodded to Catherine, who displayed the financial records on a screen behind the podium. "Senator Carmichael is nearly $1 million in debt. Campaign expenses, gambling debts, personal loans. My aunt's investigators have documented all of it. The senator needed money desperately, and marrying me was his solution." The room erupted. Reporters shouted questions. Bradley's face went from concerned to furious in an instant. "Furthermore," Elvin continued, raising her voice over the chaos, I recorded a video statement yesterday afternoon, timestamped and witnessed, stating clearly that I left my wedding of my own free will, that Everett Puller did not coerce or kidnap me, and that I was making a rational, informed decision. I am not mentally ill. I am not having a breakdown. I am simply a woman who decided to choose freedom over obligation. Richard Graymore pushed through the crowd, his lawyers trying to hold him back. Vivienne, stop this nonsense right now. You're embarrassing yourself and this family. No, father, Elvin said, and her voice carried a strength that made everyone in the room go quiet. You're embarrassing yourself. You spent years controlling every aspect of my life, molding me into the perfect ornament for your empire. You tried to marry me off to a man drowning in debt because it served your political ambitions. And when I finally found the courage to say no, you filed false kidnapping charges against an innocent man rather than admit you don't control me anymore. I am your father, Richard roared, his composure finally shattering. I know what's best for you. Everything I've done has been to protect you, to give you the life you deserve. The life you wanted, Elvin corrected, tears streaming down her face now but her voice never wavering. Not the life I wanted. Never once did you ask me what I wanted. You just assumed that because you provided money and status and opportunity you owned me. But you don't, father. You never did. The room was silent, except for the whir of cameras. I love you, Elvin continued, her voice breaking. Despite everything, I love you, but I can't let you control my life anymore. I can't marry Bradley. I can't live in that mansion pretending to be happy. I can't be the daughter you designed instead of the person I actually am. Richard stared at his daughter, and for just a moment, Everett saw something flicker in his expression. Pain, loss, perhaps even the faint recognition of what he'd done. But it hardened quickly back into anger. Then you're not my daughter, Richard said coldly. If you walk away from this family, from your responsibilities, from everything I've built for you, then you're on your own, completely. No trust fund, no family connections, no Graymore name. You'll have nothing. I'll have my freedom, Elvin said simply, and that's worth more than anything you've ever given me. Richard turned and walked out, his lawyers scrambling to follow. Bradley hesitated, looked like he might say something, then followed Richard out. The room erupted into chaos, reporters shouting questions, cameras following Richard and Bradley, everyone trying to get statements, reactions, sound bites. Catherine put her arm around Vivienne, who was shaking now that the adrenaline was fatting. Everett stepped forward, positioning himself between Elvin and the surging crowd of reporters. That's all we have to say today, Catherine announced firmly. Thank you for your time. They made their way out through a back exit, Catherine's lawyers creating a barrier against the pursuing media. They climbed into Catherine's rental car, a modest sedan that felt absurdly normal after everything that had just happened, and drove in silence back to Everett's apartment. Inside, Elvin collapsed onto the couch, emotionally exhausted. I just disowned my father in front of the national media, she said, her voice hollow. I just ended my relationship with the only family I had left. You have family, Catherine said firmly, sitting beside her. You have me, and you have yourself, which is the most important thing. I know it doesn't feel like it right now, but what you did today was incredibly brave. It doesn't feel brave, Elvin whispered. It feels like I just blew up my entire life. You did, Everett said gently, but you blew up a life that was slowly killing you. Now you get to build a new one that's actually yours. Over the next hours, they watched the story explode across every media outlet. The footage of Elvin confronting her father went viral. Freedom over obligation trended on social media. Opinion pieces debated coercive control, family wealth, and the price of independence. But there was also backlash. Commentators who said Elvin was ungrateful, spoiled, throwing away a privileged life over nothing. Defenders of Richard Graymore who insisted he was a loving father being betrayed by a manipulated daughter. Bradley's supporters claiming this was all a publicity stunt. And there were the threats. By evening, Everett's apartment building had 3 news vans parked outside. His phone was flooded with calls from reporters, curiosity seekers, and people with opinions about what he'd done. Some praised him as a hero. Others called him far worse things, with racial slurs that made his stomach turn. "This is my fault," Elvin said, watching the news coverage. "I've destroyed your life, Everett. Your name is everywhere, people are saying terrible things about you, and it's all because you tried to help me." "I made my choice," Everett said. "Just like you made yours. We don't get to control how people react to those choices, but we can stand by them." His phone rang, Sarah calling. "Are you okay?" she asked immediately. "I just watched the press conference. Everett, the whole world is talking about you." "I know I'm okay, we're okay." "The bakery called," Sarah said. "Bella saw the news. She says Vivienne's job offer still stands if she wants it. Bella doesn't care about the drama, she just cares if Elvin will show up on time and do good work." Everett felt warmth spread through his chest. "Tell Bella thank you, that means more than she knows." "Everett," Sarah said more seriously, "I'm proud of you. What you did, what you're both doing, it takes real courage. Mom would be proud too." After hanging up, Everett shared the news with Vivienne, who started crying again, this time with something that looked like hope. "Bella still wants to hire me," she asked, "even after all of this." "She cares about who you are, not who your father is," Everett said. "That's the beauty of the real world. People judge you on your actions, not your last name." The evening darkened into night. Catherine ordered Chinese food, another first for Vivienne, who declared it better than any 5-star restaurant meal I've ever had. They ate directly from the containers, sitting on Everett's floor, watching the news coverage with a mixture of anxiety and dark humor. Around 10 p.m., Catherine's phone rang. She stepped onto the balcony to take it, and when she came back in, her expression was serious. "That was my lawyer," she said. "Richard has filed a lawsuit. He's claiming that Everett and I conspired to alienate Elvin from her family, that we're holding her under duress, and that she's not mentally competent to make these decisions. He's petitioned for an emergency psychiatric evaluation and temporary guardianship." Elvin went pale. "He's going to have me committed, just like you said he would." "He's going to try," Catherine corrected. "But we have Vivienne's video statement, the press conference footage, multiple witnesses attesting to her mental competence. It won't be easy for him to get a judge to order an evaluation against her will. But," she hesitated, "it's going to be a long fight. Expensive, public, ugly. Are you both prepared for that?" Everett looked at Vivienne. They'd been partners in this for barely 48 hours, but it felt like longer. They'd faced police, press conferences, public scrutiny, and threats. They'd stood up to powerful men and told the truth. "I'm prepared," Everett said. "Me too," Elvin added. "I'm not going back, no matter what it takes." Catherine smiled. "Then we fight together." They spent the next hour going over legal strategy, discussing what came next, preparing for the battles ahead. It was exhausting, overwhelming, terrifying. But it was also empowering. For the first time, Elvin wasn't being talked about, she was part of the conversation. Making decisions, voicing opinions, taking control of her own narrative. Around midnight, Catherine left to return to her hotel, promising to return first thing in the morning. Everett gave Elvin his bed again and settled on the couch. Both of them too wired to sleep, but too exhausted to stay awake. "Everett," Vivienne's voice came from across the dark apartment. "Are you awake?" "Yeah." "Thank you. I know I keep saying it, but I need you to understand. You changed my life. You gave me a chance when no one else would. You believed I was strong enough to choose freedom even when I didn't believe it myself." Everett was quiet for a moment. "You did the hard part, Vivienne. I just opened a door. You're the one who walked through it." "We walked through it," Elvin corrected. "Together, partners in crime, remember." "Partners in crime," Everett agreed, smiling in the darkness. They fell silent, and eventually Everett drifted into an uneasy sleep, filled with dreams of press conferences and courtrooms and doors opening onto unknown futures. He woke to his phone alarm at 5:30 a.m., Vivienne's first day at the bakery. She emerged from the bedroom already dressed in simple jeans and a t-shirt Catherine had bought her hair pulled back, her face free of makeup. She looked nervous but determined. "Ready?" Everett asked. "No," Elvin admitted, "but I'm going anyway." They walked to Bella's bakery through the pre-dawn darkness, past the news vans still camped outside Everett's building, ignoring the photographers who tried to follow them. The black SUV from Richard's security team was still there, a constant shadow, but Everett noticed it didn't follow them to the bakery. Even Richard Ashford's reach had limits. Bella was already at work when they arrived, elbow-deep in dough. She looked up at Elvin and raised an eyebrow. "You ready to work, or are you here to cause more drama?" "Ready to work, ma'am," Elvin said firmly. "Good, put on an apron. We've got 300 croissants to make before the morning rush." And just like that, Elvin Ashford, Heiress, Runaway bride national news story, became Elvin the bakery employee. Everett watched through the window as she tied on an apron and got to work, following Bella's instructions, learning the rhythms of the kitchen, becoming part of something real and honest and entirely her own. His phone buzzed, a text from an unknown number. "Mr. Puller, this is David Chen from the Richmond Culinary Institute. I saw your story on the news, specifically the part about you saving up for culinary school. We'd like to offer you a full scholarship to our program, starting next semester. Your actions showed the kind of character we value in our students. Interested?" Everett read the message 3 times, certain he was misunderstanding. A full scholarship to culinary school. The dream he'd been working toward for years, handed to him because he'd done the right thing. He looked through the bakery window at Vivienne, who was laughing at something Bella had said, flour dusting her clothes, looking more genuinely happy than he'd ever seen her. He typed back, "Very interested, thank you." The next weeks were hard. Richard's lawsuit proceeded, though Catherine's lawyers fought it at every turn. The media attention eventually faded to background noise. Bradley Carmichael's campaign imploded after his financial records became public, and he withdrew from the Senate race. Richard Graymore remained stubborn, refusing to speak to Vivienne, maintaining that she'd betrayed the family. But slowly, very slowly, cracks appeared in his resolve. Catherine reported that he watched every news clip of Vivienne, every interview she gave, every appearance she made. He was watching his daughter build a life without him. And maybe, just maybe, beginning to realize what he'd lost. 3 months later, Everett stood in the kitchen of Bella's bakery after hours, the space transformed for a small celebration. Sarah was there with her fiancé, Kevin. Catherine had flown in from her home in Boston. Bella had closed the bakery early to host them. And Vivienne. Elvin moved through the space with confidence now, setting out the pastries she'd made for the occasion. She'd been working at the bakery for 3 months, had been promoted to assistant baker, was taking online business classes in her spare time, and had just signed a lease on a tiny studio apartment of her own. She was building a life, a real one. "Speech," Sarah called out, raising her glass of champagne. The cheap kind from the grocery store, not the expensive bottles that used to flow at Graymore estate parties. Elvin laughed but stepped forward. Okay. I'm not good at speeches. Turns out all those years of charity gala speaking didn't actually prepare me for real life, but I'll try." She looked around at the small group gathered in the bakery, at the people who'd become her chosen family. 3 months ago, I was standing in a mansion, wearing a wedding dress, about to marry a man I didn't love. I was trapped in a life that looked perfect from the outside but felt hollow inside. And then Everett, she smiled at him, a man I barely knew, offered me the most precious gift anyone has ever given me, a choice. That choice cost both of us so much, our reputations, our security, our comfortable lives, but it gave us something infinitely more valuable, freedom. The freedom to decide who we want to be, what we want to do, how we want to live. She raised her glass. So here's to freedom. Here's to choosing yourself. Here's to the people who give you choices instead of orders. And here's to new beginnings. To new beginnings, everyone echoed. As the group celebrated, Everett found himself standing next to Elvin at the bakery counter. "You did it," he said quietly. "Built a new life from scratch." "We did it," Elvin corrected. "I couldn't have done it alone, Everett. You gave me the courage to start." She turned to face him fully, and something in her expression made his breath catch. "I need to tell you something," Elvin said. "Something I've been wanting to say for weeks but wasn't sure how." "Okay," Everett said, suddenly nervous. "When you warned me that morning about Bradley, when you told me to hide in the trunk of your car, when you chose to risk everything to help me, I thought you were crazy. I thought we were both crazy. But also," she took a breath, "I felt seen for the first time in my life. Really seen, not as Richard Ashford's daughter or Bradley Carmichael's fiancée, but as Vivienne, just Vivienne." She moved closer. "And over these last 3 months, working alongside you, building these new lives together, I've realized something. You didn't just save me from a bad marriage, Everett. You showed me what real partnership looks like. What it means when someone supports you without trying to control you, believes in you without trying to change you, stands beside you without trying to own you." Everett's heart was hammering now. "Vivienne, I'm falling in love with you," she said simply. "Not because you rescued me, not because I'm grateful, but because you're kind and brave and genuine in ways I didn't know people could be. And I needed to tell you that, even if you don't feel the same way, even if this is too complicated or too soon or too." Everett kissed her. It wasn't like the fairy tale kisses from movies. It was awkward and surprising and tasted like champagne and chocolate croissants. It was real and imperfect and absolutely perfect. When they pulled apart, both slightly breathless, Elvin was smiling. "So," she said, "does that mean you feel the same way?" "I've been falling in love with you since you kicked off your designer heels and climbed into my trunk," Everett admitted. "I just didn't think I had the right to say anything. I'm still just a waiter." "You're a culinary student," Elvin corrected. "And you're the bravest man I've ever met. And you're not just anything, Everett Puller. You're everything I didn't know I needed." Behind them, Sarah cleared her throat loudly. "Are you two going to kiss again, or can we cut the cake?" Everyone laughed, and the celebration continued. But Everett and Elvin stayed close, hands intertwined, two people who'd chosen freedom and found love in the process. 6 months later, the small courtroom was packed for the final hearing in Richard Graymore v. Elvin Ashford. 6 months of legal battles had led to this moment, the judge's final ruling on Richard's petition for guardianship. Elvin sat beside Catherine and their lawyers, Everett in the row behind her for support. Richard sat across the aisle with his legal team, looking older than he had 6 months ago, worn down by the battle. The judge reviewed the evidence: Vivienne's video statement, testimony from employers and friends, psychiatric evaluations showing no mental illness, evidence of her successful independent living, character witnesses including Bella, Sarah, and even some of her former friends from the estate who'd quietly reached out to support her. "Mr. Ashford," the judge said finally, "I understand that you believe you're acting in your daughter's best interests, but the evidence overwhelmingly shows that Miss Graymore is a competent adult making rational decisions about her own life. Your petition for guardianship is denied." Richard slumped in his seat, the fight finally draining out of him. "Furthermore," the judge continued, "I'm going to say something off the record, though it will be in the transcript. Mr. Ashford, you're a powerful man. You've built an empire, but you're about to lose your daughter, Not because she was taken from you, but because you never learned the difference between love and control. She's standing right there, trying to build a life of her own, and you keep trying to drag her back into a cage. At some point, you need to decide what matters more, having power over your daughter or having a relationship with her, because you can't have both. The gavel came down. The case was over. Elvin had won. Outside the courthouse, Richard stood alone while his lawyers packed up. Elvin hesitated at the door, looking back at her father. "I should go to him," she said to Everett. "Are you sure?" "He's still my father," Elvin said simply, "even after everything." She walked over to Richard, who looked up at her approach with an expression Everett couldn't quite read. Pride, regret, stubborn anger, maybe all three at once. "Vivienne," Richard said, her name heavy with unspoken words. "Father." They stood there, and Everett watched as years of control and rebellion, love and resentment, played out in the space between them. "I was wrong," Richard said finally, the words clearly costing him. "About Bradley, about the wedding, about thinking I could plan your life. The judge was right. I confused control with protection, ownership with love." Vivienne's eyes filled with tears. "Do you really mean that?" "I don't know how to be a father without controlling everything," Richard admitted. "I don't know how to watch you make your own choices and trust that you'll be okay, but I'm trying to learn, if you'll let me." "I'm not coming back to the estate," Elvin said firmly. "I'm not rejoining the family business. I'm not going back to that life. This life I've built, working at the bakery, my tiny apartment, my relationship with Everett, it's mine, and it makes me happy." Richard nodded slowly. "The baker. Your mother would have loved that, you know. She always wanted to open a little cafe, serve her own pastries. I told her it was beneath an Ashford." His voice cracked. "I told her a lot of things that I should have kept to myself." "Mom loved you," Elvin said gently, "but she would have wanted me to choose happiness over obligation." "She would have," Richard agreed. "She tried to tell me that before she died. I didn't listen." He looked at his daughter, really looked at her. "You look like her, especially now with your hair pulled back like that, flour on your clothes. You look like she did when I first met her, before I tried to make her into something she wasn't." "I'm not going to disappear from your life, Father," Elvin said. "But I need you to respect my boundaries, accept my choices. Let me be who I am, not who you think I should be." "I can try," Richard said. "It won't be perfect. I'll probably interfere when I shouldn't, offer advice you don't want, struggle to let go, but I can try." Elvin stepped forward and hugged her father, tentative at first, then stronger. Richard held her like she might disappear, and for the first time since this whole thing started, Everett saw genuine emotion on Richard Ashford's face. They weren't fixed. Years of damage couldn't be undone in one conversation, but it was a start. 1 year later, the grand opening of Bella's second location was a celebration of everything impossible becoming possible. Bella had decided to expand, and Elvin had used the small trust fund her mother had left her, the one Richard couldn't control, to become a business partner. The new bakery was in a modest neighborhood, nothing fancy, but it was bright and welcoming and filled with the smell of fresh bread. Local families came in for morning pastries, students studied over coffee, and Elvin worked behind the counter alongside hired staff, genuinely happy. Everett had graduated from culinary school with honors and had a job offer from a prestigious restaurant in Richmond. But he turned it down to become head baker at Bella's second location, working alongside Elvin to build something together. The grand opening party included Sarah and Kevin, now married, Catherine, who visited regularly and had reconciled with Richard enough that they could share awkward holiday dinners, Bella, proud as any parent at her protege's success, and Richard Ashford, standing in the corner looking uncomfortable but present, trying to learn how to be a father without being a controller. "Can you believe this?" Elvin asked Everett as they surveyed the packed bakery. A year ago, I was hiding in your trunk, terrified of what came next. Now look at us." "I believe it," Everett said, slipping his arm around her waist. "You did the hard work, built the life you wanted from nothing." "Not nothing," Elvin corrected. "I had you. I had Catherine. I had people who believed I could be more than just Richard Ashford's daughter or Bradley Carmichael's wife." She turned to face him fully. "Everett Puller, you changed my life by giving me 3 words: hide in the trunk. But what you really gave me was permission to save myself, and I will spend the rest of my life being grateful for that courage." Everett pulled a small box from his pocket, and Vivienne's eyes went wide. "I'm not great with words," Everett said, his voice shaking slightly. "I'm better with actions, with showing up, with being present. But I need to say this, Vivienne, you're the bravest person I've ever met. You gave up everything for freedom, and you built something beautiful from that choice. You inspire me every single day, and I want to spend the rest of my life building things with you: businesses, homes, a family, adventures, whatever we want. No one to tell us we can't. Just us choosing each other every day." He opened the box, revealing a simple engagement ring. Nothing like the enormous diamond Bradley had given her, but somehow more meaningful. "Elvin Ashford, will you marry me? Not because it's expected, not because it serves anyone's agenda, but because we love each other and we want to build a life together." Elvin was crying and laughing at the same time. "Yes, yes, of course, yes." The bakery erupted in cheers as Everett slid the ring onto her finger. Sarah was crying. Catherine was beaming. Even Richard looked emotional, though he tried to hide it. Here's the real question. What would you risk for the chance to truly live life on your own terms? Drop your answer below, because sometimes the greatest freedom comes from the scariest choices. That night, after the celebration ended and they'd cleaned up the bakery, Everett and Elvin sat on the floor of the empty space, eating leftover cake and watching the city lights through the window. "Do you ever regret it?" Elvin asked. "Everything you gave up to help me, your job at the estate, the simple life you had before everything got complicated." Everett considered the question seriously. "I gave up invisibility. I gave up safety. I gave up a life where I kept my head down and didn't make waves. But I gained something better. I gained purpose, love, partnership, and the knowledge that when it mattered, I chose to do the right thing. How could I regret that?" "We chose," Elvin corrected, "both of us. You chose to offer me freedom and I chose to take it. We chose each other, and we're still choosing each other every day." "Every day," Everett agreed, kissing her softly. They sat in comfortable silence, two people who'd risked everything for freedom and found love in the process. The black waiter who'd warned the billionaire heiress. The runaway bride who'd hidden in a trunk. The partners in crime who'd become partners in life. Their story had started with 3 words whispered in desperation: hide in the trunk. But it had become something far greater. A testament to the power of choice, the courage of breaking free, and the beauty of building something real from the ashes of what was expected. Outside, the city moved on, full of other people making their own choices, facing their own crossroads, deciding between safety and freedom. But inside Bella's second location, in a space built by courage and sustained by love, Everett and Elvin had already made their choice. And they'd choose it again, every single day, for the rest of their lives. Epilogue. 2 years later, Everett and Elvin were married in a small ceremony at the bakery. Surrounded by the family they'd chosen rather than inherited, Richard walked Ulvina down the aisle, tears streaming down his face, finally understanding that letting go was the greatest act of love he could offer his daughter. Their story became local legend, the waiter and the heiress who chose freedom over fortune and found both. They expanded to 5 bakery locations, started a nonprofit helping people escape controlling relationships, and lived modestly but richly in the life they'd built together. And every year on the anniversary of that fateful morning, they'd sit in Everett's old Honda Civic, which he'd kept despite being able to afford better, and remember the day everything changed with 3 simple words. Hide in the trunk. The words that saved a life. The words that sparked a love story. The words that proved that sometimes the greatest act of courage is offering someone a choice, and the greatest act of love is helping them make it.